submit their names and addresses to Superintendent Lang if they wanted to participate remotely under the public input portion of our meeting. During our public input session, anyone who has joined us through the GoToMeeting platform and expressed interest in making a comment will be recognized by the superintendent and allowed to speak with the committee. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, they are encouraged to email one of us during the meeting, and we'll try to read those questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So, welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. As most of you are probably aware, last meeting we voted to start the school year using a hybrid model of instruction while also allowing families to elect a fully remote option. Tonight we'll be discussing those plans in more detail and hopefully answering many of the questions we've been getting. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank all of you that have emailed us with your questions, comments, and suggestions. We've gotten so many emails over the last few weeks that it's been very hard to respond to all of them, but we hope to address a lot of your questions tonight. I know the superintendent is also planning to have some parent information sessions later this week, which we'll be talking about later in the meeting, and developing a frequently asked questions document to help families in making the decision of which model to choose. So our first item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from our meetings on July 28th and August 4th.
I recommend that the school committee approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting on July 28th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions or corrections on those minutes? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from July 28th? Aye. Okay, 5-0.
I recommend that the school committee approve the minutes of the regular school committee meeting on August 4th, 2020.
Any seconds?
Second, sorry.
Okay, any comments or questions on minutes from that meeting? Okay, all in favor of approval?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Great. All right, next up, we have good news. I know Donna mentioned she has some good news to share.
Yes, this comes from the Byam Elementary School. They hosted a food drive to support the Table of Plenty, and the Byam School community did a great job, collected enough food to fill 2 vans.
Wow.
And that was dropped off to the Table of Plenty. So thank you very much to the Byam School community for helping out with that.
Okay, anybody else have any good news they want to share? Okay. All right, so we are now to our first public input part of our meeting. As I just mentioned, anyone that wanted to participate contacted the superintendent with their name and address and is now logged on to GoToMeeting, so I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Yep, thank you very much. It's good to see everyone tonight. We had 2 individuals email to speak to us tonight under public participation, Kristen Erickson and Amy Domo. So I am going to unmute Kristen and Amy. Kristen and Amy, you may need to unmute yourself on your own computer. There you go, Kristen, and there you go, Amy. So maybe if the 2 of you could just begin by just stating your name and address, and then you are live at the school committee meeting to make your public statement.
Sure, thank you. I'm Kristen Erickson, 291 Acton Road, and Miss Amy?
Thank you. I am Amy Domo, and I reside at 5 Autumn Lane.
First, we wanted to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. Amy and I, with another person, or 2 more people, are the interim leaders of the Chelmsford Special Education Parent Advisory Council, which I will further call CPAC from now on. We felt that it was necessary to speak on behalf of those parents and guardians whose children currently receive special ed services as outlined in IEPs and 504 accommodation plans. In concert with the Chelmsford Special Needs Family Support Group, which is a private support group for families in Chelmsford with special ed needs, we have heard from parents and guardians regarding their multifaceted concerns for the delivery of services during this unprecedented time. We'll highlight several overarching themes and several areas of concern as they have been expressed to us. They include
the difficulty that parents and guardians of children with special needs have making decisions about the best model of learning for their child or children with little information about the specifics of programming relative to each model and special education. While we understand all parents of the district are currently making decisions, the complexities of our children's profiles necessitate dissemination of such information. This in turn will allow us to select optimal learning environments based on a variety of factors, including health concerns, the support of social emotional needs, access to the appropriate delivery of instruction, access to appropriately trained personnel, etc. Relative to appropriate personnel, we want to convey to this committee and CPS administration our concerns that special education paraprofessionals could be utilized for duties other than direct work with our children, either in school or within the remote model. While we understand there are times staff will need to be shifted around based on exposure to the virus and/or illness, it is our expectation that our children will continue to have access to appropriately trained staff. Regarding the delivery of services and therapies, such as pull-out instructional services for reading, math, writing, social skills, as well as speech and language, occupational and physical therapies, families are wondering how the district intends to schedule such services and how the delivery of services will specifically be impacted by an shortened in-person school day and/or remote learning. Collectively, we have concerns about the changes in nursing practices relative to children with complex medical needs. For example, those requiring G-tube care or those requiring assistance with self-care tasks such as toileting, as well as additional procedures related to health and safety protocols due to COVID-19, such as the distancing of individuals, the isolation of ill children and staff, and the procurement and usage of PPE, etc. In addition, we have had many queries about the impact of these learning models upon the special education referral and evaluation processes. Parents are concerned about those evaluations that began prior to remote learning and were not completed, as well as how evaluations will be conducted given limited time in school. Parents and guardians highlighted their concerns that evaluations be further impacted by the inherent restrictions of a remote learning model, as access to in vivo observations within authentic learning environments will be limited.
Again, this is just a snapshot of the many concerns that parents and guardians have voiced relative to special education. For a more in-depth understanding of these concerns, we strongly encourage that you read a letter that was penned by the Special Needs Family Support Group, and I will attach this letter and that letter in an email to you guys later. Based on the brief summary above, we have two outstanding recommendations for the committee and members of the Chelmsford Public School Administrative Team. One is to afford special education families an opportunity to pose questions in a public forum, and also allow Chelmsford Public Schools to share its special ed plans for all learning models for students with both IEPs and 504s. We also suggest that the lines of communication remain open between parents and guardians and teachers and specialists regarding the effectiveness of instruction, regardless of the chosen model. We suggest that a plan for regular communication be individually developed with families, particularly regarding the frequency of communication, as well as the preferred mode of communication prior to the start of the new school year. It's imperative that these families and CPS partner together in order to provide and sustain optimal learning for all special education children within the district. That's it.
Thank you, Kristen and Amy. If you do want to send along that email to myself and the committee members, we'll take a look at it and we'll include it with our information from the meeting. But
Will do.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
sharing your
Thank
Thanks
concerns.
so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good night.
You too.
All right.
Okay, that's it for public input.
Yes, we only had those two individuals.
Okay, before we get into new business, I just wanted to mention that one of the items on the agenda is a review of the ongoing work on our website. So the superintendent has invited one of the people working on the website to join us remotely tonight to present what's been done so far. And to make things easier on the presenter, he was asked to log into the meeting at 7. So that being the case, if we're not finished with all the agenda items listed before that one by 7, I'd like to pause, hear from the representative, and then we can rejoin where we left off. Or if we are ahead of schedule, we could do some other items after it, just so that he can log in at 7 and make his presentation, if everybody's okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, great, okay. All right, so our first new business item is return to school planning update.
Thank you. If you just give me 2 seconds, I accidentally closed the wrong program. So let me just get that going again.
So while you're doing that, Dennis, how do you want to handle questions that we may have? Do you want us to wait till after the presentation? Or-
Yeah, why don't we hear the presentation and, you know, if maybe some of the questions be answered then, and then, you know, what other questions we have, we can ask. Yep.
That would be good. So again, I want to thank the, you know, audience and parents and different members who have been watching this. To kind of echo what Dennis had said recently, over the last couple of weeks, we received a considerable amount, more than usual, emails and calls and questions about what the fall is going to look like. What, again, even say from what Kristen and Amy were discussing about special ed services and what they might look like. As a district, I just want to let everyone know, you know, we're fully back and preparing for the fall. We've been working all summer on putting our plans together for whichever learning option we ultimately decided to go with. And what I hope to do tonight is share a little bit of information with you that I think will be helpful. And I think it's going to address a lot of the common questions that have been coming up. A lot of the different emails we've been receiving have very specific asks of individual students and what their learning might look like. So we will get back to everyone, but one of the easiest and quickest tacks that we've decided to take is similar to a little bit later on tonight. Amy Reese, our Director of Student Support Services, has put together like a frequently asked questions sheet. We're also putting one of those together from just a culmination of all the emails that we've received. We're going to post that FAQ response up to the district website, and then we're going to reply to each of the individual emails that people have sent us with a copy of the link that will hopefully address the questions that they've asked. And then if not, again, if someone has a really specific question about their particular student and their needs, all of our district staff are back at this point, so our building-based leadership team, our departmental teams are all back, whether it's the building principals, assistant principals, special ed department. People can have follow-up conversations with individuals who might be able to help them around their specific needs. But we're going to try by the end of the week to finalize that FAQ, get it posted to the website, get it announced, and be able to share that with the public. I think a couple of other events that we're going to have is Thursday night at 7, and then Friday morning at 9. I'm going to host kind of a question and answer session, a little informational session via a web link. So that will be going out in a Connect Ed message to families, as well as we'll push that on social media, where I'll do a little overview for everyone, maybe if people weren't able to see some of our meetings, although we have been getting very good hits as far as the viewing audience, so that's been excellent. But we'll review kind of where we're at in the process, talk about what information we need from parents, and then just answer some of the questions that have been coming up from time to time. So we're going to have those sessions on Thursday and Friday. And then even when we actually talk about specific areas, you know, one area that's come up, I've spoken with Peggy Gump, who's our coordinator for school nursing services, and we're going to do one of two things. We're either going to host a session, another like a webinar type focus, where we're going to talk specifically about the district's response to COVID-19, what would happen under various scenarios. So I'm contemplating whether we should do that as a separate kind of standalone session, or if we should invite Peggy and other providers to a school committee meeting and have a session on that, or both. So I'm still kind of contemplating that, and based on the way the Thursday and Friday morning sessions go, I'll have a better understanding on how we should move forward with that. But, so tonight what I'm hoping to do is answer some of the commonly asked questions, provide a little overview with some specifics about what we know is going to happen for the fall. I put together a few quick slides to just provide some talking points for us as we work through them. And then obviously, like I said, try to follow up by Friday with all of our families with that FAQ document. So a couple of things have happened since the school committee did vote to begin the school year under the hybrid learning model at our last school committee meeting. We had been talking with our bargaining units all summer, but we did formally sit down to begin the negotiation process, because even though the school committee has selected that as the option that you would like to implement for the start of the school year, there are implications on our employee groups, so we need to have discussions and dialogue and bargain with those groups. So that has begun and that is ongoing. We have a couple more sessions this week, and that will probably go right up until the start of the school year, but I do want to let you know that that is in the works. And as I mentioned at one of our previous school committee meetings with regard to the school calendar, we'd indicated that we would not be going back before Labor Day. I believe I also informed you that at the state level, the Commissioner of Education and the AFT and the MTA, who represent all of our employee unions in the state, had basically agreed to up to 10 days without students in the buildings for staff to be able to acclimate, have some professional development, training around safety protocols before kids are introduced to the mix. So while the up to 10 days needs to be negotiated, and that's one of our talking points with the unions, we knew that we weren't going to be going back before Labor Day, and we knew daycare was an issue for parents, so we wanted to be able to message that they shouldn't, they should plan accordingly for that. We're still in negotiations. You know, we're not at the point where we can announce the definitive start date to the school year, but I can tell you that it will not be prior to the week of September 14th. So the 4-day week before Labor Day and then the 4-day week after Labor Day will be dedicated to some type of training, professional development, so students will not be in the building that day. If we end up agreeing to go all the way to the 10 days, that brings the start date for the students to Thursday, the 17th. Physically being on site, what the dilemma that it presents for us, some view it as a positive, some as a negative. The Wednesday, the 16th, under our hybrid model, Wednesday is a remote day for everyone. That would technically be the kids' first day, but it wouldn't be a day in school, it would be a day online. So we're gonna have some discussion about, does that make sense to have the first day be remote? Does it make more sense to have the first day be in person? Under either scenario, the earliest I see us going back, just for the public to be able to plan, you know, would be Monday the 14th. You know, the latest in-person day for students would be Thursday the 17th. It is possible that we have our first remote day on Wednesday the 16th. But under any circumstance, parents need to be providing and planning for childcare right up through that week of September 14th. So at this point in time, I'm at least comfortable saying that. The other issue, the definitive start date for students, whether it's remote or in person, is a subject to negotiations, and so that does need to play itself out. But certainly that week before Labor Day and the week after Labor Day, we will not have students in the buildings. So parents do need to plan accordingly for that. Is that fair? Does that at least, you know, kind of set the start date for families?
Make sure I heard. 14th is the earliest, 17th is the latest.
In person,
In person.
correct. So our education program will start the week of the 14th. I just do not know the exact date. But week before Labor Day, week after Labor Day, parents need to plan for childcare for those 2 weeks. And as soon as we have a definitive, I would let you and everyone obviously know, and we'll adjust our school calendar. But we need to be planning through at least the 14th coverage. Okay?
Thank you.
So a couple of other things have happened. Last Friday, we ended up sending a communication home to our families, and a copy of that communication is in the your packet tonight. You know, what we asked parents to do was, over the course of the next week, so between last Friday and this coming Friday, the 21st, to take a look at the information that they've been provided and basically make a selection and tell us which model they would like their students to begin the 2021 school year under. Would they like to select the hybrid option, which again has 2 days of in-person school and 3 days of remote, or would they like to select the full remote option, 5 days of remote schooling? I'm not going to belabor it now because it's part of a slide, but there is some confusion about remote, and is remote under the hybrid or is a remote a standalone? But our families do have an option of doing 5 days of remote schooling, separate from the option of selecting hybrid, which has 2 days of in-person and 3 days of remote. So when we get there on the slide, I've broken it down, so hopefully it's a little bit easier for families to understand. But we did ask them by Friday to be able to get back to us and tell us which option they're feeling at this point in time they would like their students to begin with. And then I did mention community parent input sessions, Thursday night at 7, and then Friday morning at 9 a.m. will be online sessions for families to be able to join us.
Can I just ask, if we're doing these information sessions Thursday, Friday, and the frequently asked questions document might not be due to the end of the week. Is it possible for us to push off the deadline to, say, a Monday? So people have time to digest all that information and make the selection?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, and when we get to this, we've already had over 3,000 responses, so a lot of parents are already responding. I would like to leave the deadline, the date Friday. However, we're not going to start tracking people down until next week. So if they attend the session on Thursday or they attend the session Friday, they take a look at the FAQ. I'm not doing anything with the data until next week. So if they need the weekend to kind of think about it and make their decision, we're not going to have school staff start reaching out until next week from the families that we haven't heard from. So if people are ready, I'd still like them to try to make the decision. If they're on the fence, take a look at the discussions, take a look at the materials. Again, we're not tracking you down until next week anyway. So let's try to get as much in by Friday, if you just know. And I think that's what we're seeing. People want hybrid, they want some type of in-person instruction, or they want the full remote. These people are logging in their choices, and I don't think they're going to change. It's the people who might be on the fence. So I say make your best effort to get us the data by Friday. If you don't, obviously we're going to have to reach out to you and see what you select. It won't happen until next week, so I think we're fine on that front.
Just with regards to the parent information, I know that one of the words in there was binding. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so we do need to, 2 weeks ago, on the Thursday, we sent out just like an update. We wanted to find out from parents where they felt at that particular point in time. Were they leaning more towards the hybrid option, or were they leaning more towards the full remote? Because we wanted to inform the discussion at our meeting the week ago Monday. So that was really just for informational purposes, try to get a feel for where they were at. We do at this point in time, though, need to make the selection or hear from parents how they want their student to begin the school year. So when I say binding, they're going to tell us basically, I'd like to operate under the hybrid, and we're going to schedule them to be under the hybrid to start the school year. If they say, I want to be fully remote, we're going to schedule them to be fully remote, but we need to make some staff decisions with regard to assignment of, the number of students to teachers, and try to figure out if we can accommodate, student requests and staff requests. So that's what we mean by binding. It would be very difficult if, this was just open-ended and people could basically sign up whenever. What we ask for parents to do is basically make a decision that they would be comfortable with through at least the first term. So once we know which students select which models, we're going to be able to break out some timelines or some dates during the course of the school year, where we might be able to consider students for transfer from one model to another. So if you started remote and, you got a sense that, you felt a little bit more comfortable with the hybrid and how that was working, and you wanted to shift, you can't tell us on a Tuesday that you want to shift to hybrid for Wednesday, because our cohorts would already be established and we may not have space to safely integrate you into that cohort. So we have to kind of make some time periods where we can readjust we may have to readjust some staff, we might have to readjust our student counts, figure out our cohorts. So we need a little bit of advance notice. So we just wanted people to at least commit to that first term. I have told families also, if you selected hybrid and, it's not working for you and you need to move to a fully remote model, it is going to be easier to move from hybrid to fully remote, as opposed to, because you're taking someone out of the physical equation and going online, as opposed to being fully online, trying to be integrated into the in-person model. So that certainly is going to be a little easier to accommodate. The frequency with which we might be able to accomplish that might be a little bit more frequently than the other way around. But I really won't know until we have the data to be able to determine that. But when we said binding, we just need people to kind of lock in for how they want to start the school year. And then we all realize things are going to change over the course of the fall. People might have different feelings towards one model or the other. We're going to work as very best we can to try to accomplish as many parents and students' desires to be in the various program options. But we do have to kind of lock in to be able to make some staffing decisions, and that's why we asked this to be binding.
So it would be because of staffing and building capacity.
Staffing, building capacity, and even just within classrooms, making sure that we're maintaining the appropriate ratios, and we don't have kids being integrated into cohorts and out of cohorts. It would kind of defeat the whole purpose.
And then when is the end of the first term, just so parents have some idea of what the time frame would be?
have to
The
adjust.
terms are all gonna be a little off because of the late start of the school year, but I mean, I would say probably
Like,
early to mid-November.
November-ish.
Yeah,
Around
early
Thanksgiving.
to mid-November.
All right, thank you.
So you're basically locking in for that fall period.
Okay. Are we asking questions on these things so
On,
far?
on this particular item, yes. Just
Okay,
on the survey
great.
itself and.
So if we could go back to the start dates there, that means that if we start at the earliest for in physical for kids on the students on the 14th, the staff would be here 10 days before?
No. So the staff are coming to work on Monday, the 31st. So they're going to report to work the regular day that they always would.
Okay,
It's just that they're not going to have kids in the buildings for the first up to 10 days of school. What we need to negotiate with the union is how many up to the 10 days do we want to have staff only before we introduce students to the mix?
okay.
So
So,
with the de-
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So from the 31st until whatever that day is
Correct.
of students coming, and staff is here on their own, which I personally believe is essential, given all the things that are changing. If during that time, what would be expected is that they're working together, professionally developing, doing all of those things that are required and to get these models to be as best as possible in terms of what we're delivering.
Yes, there would be like a, just like a safety training component, to talk about like building safety, how we're gonna operate our buildings logistically, discussion around, you know, even like student traffic flow within buildings, how we're gonna handle, you know, drop-off and arrival at the schools, at the end of the school day, how that's gonna work with the, pickup and dismissal of students, bathrooms, I mean, all the logistical
those
issues around
things.
safety. What the district's response is gonna be to various, situations that could come up during the course of the year. So there's gonna be a whole training component, as well as then, professional development and training around implementing the learning models, really focusing on what, the hybrid instruction is gonna look like. If you have, some students in front of you, if you have some students online, how that's gonna work, as well as we wanna be prepared in the event that we ever have to go fully remote. You know, and again, we've talked about this, and I tried to signal in my communications. You know, we want to make the very best go at hybrid, to be able to have staff start the school year, you know, making relationships, meeting the kids, assessing where they're at, figuring out what their learning is going to look like for the beginning part of the school year. It is certainly possible and probably likely at some point that based on the health data trends, if we ever find ourselves in a situation where we don't feel it's safe anymore for in-person instruction and we decide to move to fully remote, we want to know ahead of time what the fully remote model is going to look like. We want teachers to be comfortable transitioning really quickly to the in-person hybrid, to the fully remote. So we want to have time to work all of that through, so that both of our programs, whether it be hybrid or it be fully remote, are very robust, and we can move frequently or quickly between models if we have to.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else in the survey?
So, so the survey is out. Again, just kind of high-level detail for you for right now. We did hear back from just about 3,000 of our 5,000 students, so I think that's excellent for just the weekend and a day. The data trends are somewhat similar to the unofficial survey that we did about a week and a half ago. We're running about 70-30 right now. About 70% of students are opting for hybrid learning, and about 30% of students are opting for fully remote. So previously it was 75, no, I'm sorry, it was 2/3 wanted hybrid. It's gone up slightly, want a little bit more hybrid, and less the fully remote. If those numbers prevail, they'll be within the ballpark of what we were thinking. But just to give you a sense at this point, we've got about 3,000 respondents, and it's looking at 70-30. We'll know, like I said, more Friday. I don't anticipate 100% of people will let us know Friday. We will have to do some tracking down for families that haven't responded, but that'll begin next week in earnest. So I have a couple of updates for you around special education, technology, and then community education and some of our childcare programs. But an example of what we're going to be putting together for you, for like the district frequently asked questions that come up to try to help parents answer some of the most common questions that come up, is Amy Reese, our Director of Student Support Services, and her staff put together a frequently asked questions document that they're getting from a lot of our special ed parents around special ed services and testing and assessments and where we stand. And Amy was available tonight to join us through remotely here. So what I'm going to ask Amy to do is, Amy, I'm going to unmute you so you can join us. And then your FAQ will be up on the screen as well. So the viewing audience, I believe, will be able to see you as well as the FAQ. And I would ask that you maybe just kind of walk the school committee through some of the questions that you've been receiving, how you went about putting this FAQ together, and you know, any of the specific talking points. And then when Amy is done presenting, if staff have if the school committee members have additional questions for Amy, we can ask them of her at that time. So Amy, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So I believe,
All right,
again, your picture and the FAQ is up on the screen.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting me take some time to kind of answer some questions and review some of the commonly asked questions that our team chairs have been receiving, the principals, some assistant principals, I think some directly to myself, as I can understand that there's a lot of questions that families have about our special populations group. So the FAQ that I kind of put together in is up on the website as well as here tonight. Kind of focuses on all the groups that our working group had focused on. So largely it includes our special education students, Section 504, our ELL learners as well. And we also took into consideration the social emotional learning components for all of those groups of all students and our special population students, and some of our homeless and foster care students as well. So it's not just a document on special education. So I think one of the biggest questions that has come up is the fact of, what does my child's special education services going to look like should I choose the remote, the hybrid model? And I think the focus of the document is really focusing on the district's hybrid model that the school committee voted to start the school year with. So as you know, it's the 2 and 2, the cohort A and the cohort B, and looking at the guidelines, because we got some guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So Jesse put out some guidelines for districts to kind of take a look at to say that certain groups and certain criteria for students that are of high needs, that have complex learning needs, would need to be prioritized, as you will, to have some additional in-person learning. So whether the district went with a hybrid model or a fully remote model, we needed to really take into consideration these high needs groups to see where we could give some additional in-person learning time. So in the FAQ, it does kind of define what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education used as guidance for districts to kind of define that significant and complex needs students. So it really kind of talked about students who have a majority or a good portion, 75% or more of their school day being taught in a special education setting outside the general ed setting. It talked about having a good portion of the school day taught by special educators with specialized learning or related service providers. It also took a look at, if based on a disability need, taking a look at what the student's disability related needs were, that specific disability category a student may have complexly impacted them from learning remotely. It also talked a lot about students who needed augmentative and aided communication devices. That would be a student that we'd want to prioritize to have some more in-person learning. And then duly certified students with special education identified and our L learners as well, to take that into consideration. So looking at that, I kind of put together, what does that mean for Chelmsford? So I specifically listed our sub-separate specialized programs that we have within the district from elementary to high school, and spelled those out so that it was clear that students that are really part of these programs, so basically it's our elementary autism program that's at the Byam School. It's the New England Center for Children, our partner autism program classes that we have at the middle and the high school level. And then looking at our functional academic classroom that we have at the center school. And then those students who feed into McCarthy to our Life Schools program. And then at the high school, it's the students in the PAVE program. Are those students that really immediately fit that criteria that I just outlined, for having a good portion of their day outside the general ed setting, taught by special education, teachers and related service providers. And so I think those are the easiest, the clear-cut component. So what we are proposing for those students in those programs is to attend in both cohorts. So those students would attend in the A cohort and the B cohort. They'd be with their special education teacher in that sub-separate environment for all of their those 4 days of instruction for the same time period that those students would be in school. I think it's around 4 hours per day. Those students would then be remotely on Wednesdays, and that's the plan for that. I think a lot of questions have come up at are other students going to need be required to have additional in-person services, and those there are some. I mean, the answer is yes, and those are the cases that are going to be looked at case by case on an individual basis, where the team chairs, the building teachers, principals, et cetera, we're going to take a look at what their needs are and what are their uniques, and then have communication with families as well, and what that may look like. That may look like some students may come on a third day, or there may be some others that may come 4 days as well. Those are the models that we're looking at this time. And then have a remote learning day. What we did find is that there were a number of students in the spring that really did struggle with remote learning, and then we found some students that really did better than expected with it. So I think it's not ideal in any circumstances, or it's not like what we would want to say is best practice to have, ideally to have all of our special ed students in full time, but we also have to take into consideration, and a huge part of the DESE guidelines talks about, where you can prioritize having some of these students in person, additional time, keeping in mind and being able to keep the safety and health guidelines in place under the that are set in place for, under COVID. So that I think may help answer some of those questions. I would also encourage families to reach out to your team chair for your building. In the FAQ, I did list that by building, just so that you don't have to go searching if you don't recall who the team chair is to reach out. If you don't remember, you can email me as well, but somebody will get kind of back to you to give you some information. So I think one of the other questions that we have seen a lot of is, will my child services look different than what their IEP says? So I think in the spring, when we quickly went to remote learning, we knew that there was a time period where we were focused on maintaining skills and providing activities and support. And then we shifted into some new instructional learning, and it took a little bit of time. There was a schedule here or there a few times a week. The one thing that will be different going into the fall is that with the hybrid model or with a remote model, we're going to have schedules. Students will have a schedule, and so parents will have an idea of during each day when is ELA, when is math, when is the special education support services, when may my student have speech and language, and then what does that look like? Obviously, you have B and C grid services for those of you that have, are familiar with the special education plans, meaning in the inclusion setting and pull-out services. Services will be provided that some may look different. For example, if somebody has 3 times a week of a specialized reading program and that's pulled out, 1 or 2 of the days may be in person and another day or 2 may be remote. So a combination of the services will be provided in person from special education teachers and related service providers, and some will be provided remotely. So it may look a little different. You will get something similar in writing, a template Desi has put out that we're developing our Chelmsford Public Schools one right now, so that after school starts, you will have some documentation of what the IEP services will look like and how they'll be different than like 5 full days in the school year. I'm trying to think if we shift. Preschool. One of the other subgroups that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education talked about needing to be prioritized for in-person learning or additional in-person learning is our youngest learners, our 3 and 4-year-olds, our preschool students. So we are working to put a model and a schedule together for our CHIP students and what that may look like. I know there's been a lot of questions in previous school committee meetings from parents asking questions and emails that have come in, but we are looking to have beyond the 2 days hybrid of having our preschool students that have IEPs 4 days. So our integrated students, those are our students who are typically in an integrated classroom, and they come either in the morning or they come in the afternoon. It's a half-day program. We're going to have those students 4 days a week in person for 2-hour sessions or 2-hour class times. And our intensive students are students that have some higher needs, or our autism students that have much more sub-separate programming and don't have peer models, are going to come 4 days a week for where they're a full day program for 4 hours. So that's kind of what it looks like for CHIPS preschool. In that time frame, we'll be looking to provide the speech and language, the occupational therapy and or PT, and what that looks like. There will be some opportunities that they will also post activities that focus on the skills that your students learning, that you can do as activities as a family for that day that there is no school on the Wednesday. So that kind of helps with the CHIP questions. We're still exploring the opportunity to have peer models. I think at a prior meeting I had put in one of my recommendation things was to maybe not to suspend having tuition paying peer models for this year. I did send a survey out to our families that had students come that were gen ed students last fall or last school year to see what they were thinking about, how comfortable they were feeling, if we were having the ability to have some peer models in place, and if they'd feel comfortable participating in the program or not. So we're gathering that data. That should close by, I think, tomorrow, and then we're going to look at providing some decision making around the fact of, can we have a reduced number of peer models so that we can continue to have the that integrated model for those students that have participated in that. So that information will be forthcoming on the preschool. Let's see. I did put some information in about annual review meetings, or how we're going to hold meetings this school year, and a little bit of those questions to answer about the testing if my child was in the middle of an evaluation and started and it was suspended because we didn't have school, and what that's going to look like. I'm proposing that at least for the fall, we start continuing to have our IEP meetings remotely. I think that was one of the things we found that actually was worked out fairly well. So we're going to look at having the annual review meeting or any IEP meeting via our either Google or GoToMeeting platform. The other questions around testing, there's some information there. Anyone involved in an initial evaluation that was suspending, what we're going to do is we're going to start right from where those timelines were. So we're going to be behind, obviously, in the timelines. It's going to take a little bit to catch up. And going back in a hybrid model isn't ideal to help get that done as quick as possible. But we're going to take those that are the oldest and work in the order chronologically that those had happened in. It's kind of like a catch-22 with our staff testing and servicing students. So we want to make sure we can, not be pulling students from the short amount of time that they are going to be in school if they're in a hybrid model, and not wanting to pull, and have our special educators, our speech therapists, our psychologists pulling and testing all the time and not being able to service students. So it's going to be a balance in their schedule to be able to service students, teach students, see students, and do the testing that needs to be completed. I think I had heard a question earlier, maybe when Kristen and Amy were speaking about pulling students, if they're only in school 2 days, pulling my students. I think we're going to look at seeing if potentially we could schedule somebody to meet one-on-one with the school psychologist or the special educator, or for the folks that have to do the evaluations on a day that they're not typically in school on their cohort days, so that they will not be missing in-person instruction time, but maybe on one of their remote days miss a little bit of the remote instruction so that they can come in for the testing period. So we're going to work that out, and that would have to be scheduled with families to kind of help around a schedule to get access to students on days they're not typically in school. Let's see. Our social and emotional services and mental health, that was another component that we focused on in this special populations group. And all of our mental health providers, our clinical psychologists, our school counselors, our social workers are all going to be available to continue to provide direct instruction, indirect, and consultation services. So that is still there in place. They've been working hard to come up with ways to provide both in-person when students are in the building and remote and hybrid, or going into a Google class, and joining a classroom to help provide some smaller group instruction. Section 504, students that are on 504 plans. These are students that do have a documented disability that need and require accommodations. So students, much like the spring, where they were given accommodations, will be given accommodations whether they're in person in the hybrid model or whether they're here on their remote, their home on their remote days. It's just that sometimes some of those accommodations may look a little different. So, what a student needs and requires in class when they're here on the in-person days, they may need some different accommodations on a remote day. And actually what I've, been saying is that, accommodations are fine to give to any student. It doesn't change the curriculum. So if there's something that's maybe not even documented in the 504, but needs to be put into place because of this combination of remote and hybrid in-person learning, students will be able to access and get those accommodations that are required. Those general ed students on 504 plans are not students that would be considered or looked upon with the criteria to have additional in-person days for instruction, if that makes sense. Those are students who are would be coming the 2 days in whichever cohort they were assigned. And then the last section the FAQ talks about is our English language learners, and it kind of starts very, basic, talking about, are we required, to be providing students, in the hybrid and the remote model, which yes, obviously we are. We're going to continue to engage them in our hybrid model, and that, if we have criteria looking at the scores on the testing for ELL students, and our needier newcomers, or our it's called SLIF students, they will have, some scheduled additional time. Much like some of our other special education students, that's going to be determined whether that's going to be a third day in person, what those additional ELL services will look like. It's a little bit more challenging to schedule, I think, because each school has, I think, one ELL teacher that are covering all grade levels. But we are going to prioritize the needs as outlined in the FAQ. And then translation, interpretation services, except that's not going to change, just like we are full in person. Families will receive documents translated, or if there's a meeting that needs to take place, we have the opportunity to use translation services in their native language so that families are able to understand, communication and what the written plans and are being sent. So that's kind of it very quickly. I hope I didn't go too quickly. In a nutshell, the questions that we wanted to kind of provide some basic answers to that might help families. I know that it's a tough decision looking at, what, if I choose the hybrid model, my student will get some in-person instruction and be there the 2 days in the gen ed instruction as well, and receive some of the special education services in that setting, and some of it will be provided remotely. So it'll kind of be a combo of the way the services will be provided.
Okay, can we have a few questions? I know, Marie, you asked a
Go
question.
ahead, if you have a first.
Yeah, I have a few questions
Donna?
on
I
special ed.
I have some
On
too.
special
Okay.
ed piece.
Good.
So Amy, thank you for including the information about the team chairs. This is who parents should contact if they have questions regarding their individual children going forward?
It would be best to do that. I think they have sometimes can get, back to families quicker than sometimes folks that are trying to go through the emails and then, shift them off to folks that can really respond to that information. I would say, yes, the team chairs are a great resource if you have specific questions about the individual services. And sometimes, even in the buildings, they can reach out to the school staff as well, the principals and assistant principals. But the team chairs would be the first place to start.
Are they back now, Amy? So
The
they're-
team chairs?
Yes, they're back now. Okay, so
As of
parents,
yesterday.
great,
Yeah,
so,
they work all summer, but
Okay.
we have had our whole admin team came back as of Monday, where everyone's vacation's set and done, so
Great.
that they should be there to respond. Yes.
and then Jay, a question that came from someone through an email. Why are we taking Wednesdays off? Because we know that for some of these populations, consistency and a regular routine are really important. So why did we decide to go hybrid on Wednesday?
When the groups were looking at the different hybrid options, we were trying to look at the large numbers of students and keeping like two cohorts separate. The thought process was really to have your cohort A come in A and B, so that you can have there be a separation on Wednesdays, kind of use that to be an extra kind of full cleaning day in the buildings, and then you'd have cohort B come in. Obviously, I think that's the way we should start. We should maintain that structure. But as we get into the fall, fall is going well with our cohorts. There's nothing to say we are going to be making tweaks along the way. So we might find something that really works well scheduling-wise, something that doesn't. There can be an argument made, particularly around like some of our special populations, that if they're the same cohort, so, you're not going to say an autism classroom pretty much fully separate. They're really A and B if they're in for 4 days.
Right.
So, there wouldn't be the need necessarily for that day to do the deep cleaning of their classrooms, right, because the kids are the same. So you'd be just doing your regular, which is a little extra than we usually do anyway, but your regular cleaning. So there might be, in the long run, ways to make modifications, or I do see this as gradually adding, additional services or time. We might also find out that, the slightly truncated day, we're able to actually, lengthen it. Maybe it becomes a little bit longer, maybe it becomes a full day eventually. But I think the thought process was to start, again, kind of start slow and potentially grow up, to having the two cohorts be separate. So that's again, still what I would recommend, but leaving it open for once we get up and running and we see which programs are working well. particularly within the 5 or 6 different programs that Amy laid out that are substantially separate programs, if they're together as a cohort anyway, could they potentially be in longer? And they may. But I think a lot of it's just going to have to depend on how the whole rollout goes for the fall.
Okay, and Amy, when will parents be notified if their child is attending 2 days or 4 days?
Well, it's kind of evolving. Now we're waiting for some data on the survey as well for next week, so that we kind of look at, which students are definitely going to be looking to be hybrid, and which students are going to go fully remote, because we have had some families reach out that are in the high needs category that are considering fully remote. So the staff is kind of working and planning and working on that as we speak. We returned this week with all full admin team in place. I had some meetings in the office yesterday. We've had some admin retreat days today and tomorrow. So those are things that we're actively working on. Definitely, in the coming weeks, I can see that happening. Those programs that I outlaid are ones that, those families pretty much have an idea that those students will be proposed to come 4 days a week. And we've already been in communication with a lot of those families, as Taryn Derry, our intensive need administrator for Team Chair, has already been talking to the families. Those other students that need to be considered for other reasons for in-person services are the team chairs are going to meet like next week with the building principals and the assistant principals and the staff there to kind of talk about, those students that they have concerns about, and those students that have disability related needs that they're considering for an additional 3rd day or 4th day. Those are probably the ones that are going to be a little bit later to find out if it's going to be 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, because of the fact that we're still working on the schedules at each building and each school, and putting kids into cohorts. And then the decision has to look at how much additional time, is feasible in the building.
Just very good.
We just-
I'm sorry.
See if there's anybody else,
I'm sorry.
just see if there's more questions from anybody else,
Yeah.
because it's getting close to 7. So Maria, you have a
Okay,
question?
so, I'm trying to understand how if we have these students here 4 days a week, how we still stay within the cohorts and these students don't go in between or get exposed to more people than the particular cohort does, or the cohort gets exposed to more people as a result of these students being there 4 days a week. How does that work? They sound to me like cohort C.
Well,
All right, they sort of are like a cohort C, Maria, and that's a very good question. The reasoning behind those students in the 4 days that are in our specialized programs, that they're not going to be then jumping into the B cohort or the A cohort, is those are students who are currently instructed all day long or the majority of the school day by the special education teacher in our specialized substantially separate programming. So what we're looking at is, yes, during ideal circumstances in a full day, 5-day a week in-person schooling, we do look for opportunities to give those students some inclusion. However, we're not in an ideal situation, so we're going to look at those sub-separate students in our autism programming and our life skills programming to be, they're going to be sub-separate with the special education teacher in that small group setting.
Okay,
So in a sense, if I am in the BIAM with teacher A and at the BIAM school and I'm a student in an autism class, on the 4 days, on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm coming to school and I'm with the same 8 students, 6 students, 7 students that are in that classroom with that teacher, the same small group.
That's really important to point out, because that's the purpose of hybrid. Now, because it's really to have the cohorts and keep these separate.
That's
So
why
thank you. Yeah, that answered, I think that for me answered that question.
Yes, no,
because-
I think that's why it is a little trickier when we're looking to schedule other special education students that may need additional time
Yeah.
in person, because if their instruction is primarily in the inclusion setting, then we would have a student in cohort A and cohort B. And so that's some of the things we talked about today in our groupings with the
Okay,
administration team.
maybe by special appointment or something like that, but I think keeping the cohort separate is extremely important. Otherwise, this is not gonna work. The other thing is, EL. I think your Q&A here has a lot of information in terms of special ed, but it doesn't have much in terms of the English language learners. And I'm going to request if you can do one for English language learners and put it in a medium that can actually be translated so parents can read, because I am getting quite a few questions from these folks. And then responding is, in the language is challenging. So it would be really important to also have one that they can easily access. And the questions are about assessment. When will they know, and how will they know what level of the EL instruction they're going to need? And it's about scheduling as well, and so on. So there's not much here that talks about that. And if it's possible to have one that's more explicit for them, that they can access.
Maria, I would just,
I
Amy,
think we can translate it into, our second language or whatever language is probably needed with the EL section. I had purposely
a lot
put
of
it
them.
combined into one FAQ because we were talking about all of the special
Yeah.
populations, keeping it in line with the special population working group, and not trying to just put special education, in the forefront of the other areas.
Yeah.
But we can, any other additional questions or things that need to be addressed, please share those with me, and we can add questions to the FAQ and revise it, or get them translated as well, so families can get that information. Part of the assessment components and knowing in the scheduling is some of the stuff that's being worked on in next week, once we get some information amongst, the principals, the building staff, and Kelly Rogers as well, is kind of some of the stuff that they are working on, much like the special education staff is working on determining some of that information. So it is a work in progress. So as we have been able to kind of develop and get some of those answers and more information, we can get that information out and can add to it. But please, I'm happy to add some and answer some additional questions if there are other questions that I haven't gotten or Kelly hasn't gotten, that you may have, that families are reaching out about.
Okay.
We'll get a couple more minutes, a couple more questions. So John, anything?
No,
Jeff?
no.
Donna, any other questions?
Just, Amy, are parents expecting the IEP document and the temporary distance learning plan document, both for their students, because they're going to be both remote and in person? So they should have both of those documents, right?
The IEP is still the main document that's going to be the focus of IEP meetings for annual reviews and testing that gets developed for every student that's eligible for special education. That document, as Desi's defined it, is the document when we're fully in person. That's the document that would then be in place. And if we were in full in person, or being positive when we are full in person, we will revert back to the IEP as the document of services, et cetera. The purpose of the other template is because we are in a hybrid situation. So because we're in a hybrid situation, the IEP document cannot be implemented as it's written for services. They will receive the services. However, they may look differently in a combination of in-person instruction, specialized instruction, and remote, or speech therapy or something remotely or virtually.
Thank you. And these two are really easy. Where is this document to be posted?
So I wanted to actually bring, Amy, I got this one. I wanted to bring this up to you. So this is posted on the district website. There's a link right off the main page that Linda's created for us that brings you to all the reopening plans. So this is one of the documents listed there. And because it is on the district website, it's also on the SPED page, but because it's on the district website under reopening, it has the translate function.
Yeah.
So if you do click on the document, you can have it translated into whichever language, and it is up on the website.
Okay, but I'm gonna ask one more thing. Is this, I know you want your 7 o'clock thing, but this English language learners, okay? This is part of, there are 20 to 25% of ELs who are part of your special ed program.
Yes.
Understood. The other 150 or 175 students, I don't think that this addresses as much. So I think what Amy said was that if we send a bunch of questions, that,
If
then
you're
they'll do a
getting-
separate one.
Well, or add on to this one.
Okay.
But if you're receiving, the same kind of frequent questions, not like individual student-specific ones,
Right.
but global questions related to else. Yes,
Okay.
if you forward those to Amy and Kelly will work on
That's fine.
responding and probably adding it on to this FAQ, and it can keep growing as new questions come. And I was just trying to impress upon you that, because it is up on the district website, it's translated, so that you can select Spanish or French or whatever language you want, and it will translate for you. So this is up on the district site that Linda had made for us, as well as, because a lot does deal with special education, it's under special education as well.
Okay.
It's dual posted.
And the only other thing I was gonna
All
ask
right.
is if people would, in the special education department or schools, just consider taking a look at what safety protocols we'll have in place for testing.
For testing.
Yes.
I can quickly say that I did get I ordered a number so that each building can have a few of, like plexiglass barrier things for one-on-one testing.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think, Amy, I mean, that is a question that's gonna come up from time to time, particularly as we get back in-person schooling. We get caught up on our IEPs and reviews and assessments. So I do see this being a document that can grow. So as we continue, and I think this is gonna be a good way to communicate to families, just some of their responses to common questions that come up. John, I think you had one?
Just a quick one. I mean, this is going to be a living document. so
Yeah,
this
that's what I was
question-
trying to
Yeah.
Right, so we'll keep adding to it as we hear these themes that come up. And it can just sit on our website, and we can update SPED and ELL, and, if something else comes up about 504. And this is what we're gonna try to direct families back to, when we all receive an email, if there's a particular theme or question, we can just add it to the document and try to get in the habit of responding that way.
Okay.
Any other questions on special populations? Okay, great.
All right, Amy, thank you very much for
Thank you.
for that, Amy, it was informative.
Thank you. Excuse me, I'm gonna open my can.
So,
It's not
All right, so
the-
now we're gonna kind of take things out of order. We're gonna do the,
yeah, we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back to, we still have a lot to talk about with return to school, but we're going to jump a little bit further into the agenda. I just need a second to be able to share my screen. But as you know, the committee over the course of this past winter and spring started the process to redesign and redevelop the Chelmsford Public Schools website for the district and the individual schools. And we contracted with Brian, who's on the line with us, Brian's company, Stella Web Studios, and they've been working with us throughout the spring and the summer. We have a small working group that's been getting together to provide some feedback to Brian and his group about designs and whatnot. And he had some initial wireframes and some initial layout design for us, and he showed us about a week or so ago. And Dennis had mentioned as well, it'd be good to just show the school committee the way this is lining up, and then also just to be able to kind of show the public which we're working on. So, Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, give me 1 second, and what I'm gonna do is share my screen sharing privileges with you, so that you can also take control of the screen and be able to walk us through a little bit of your work. And again, I just, if you were listening, I just kind of set up the context of the work you've been doing with us. I'll turn it over to you, and you can just talk a little bit about kind of where you're at in the process, some of the design elements we have, and then go from there. But it's just an opportunity to give the school committee and the public a look of some of the behind-the-scenes work that's been taking place with the website redesign. So
Okay,
you're up, Brian.
Sounds great. So thanks, guys. Happy to be chatting with you all today. How's everybody doing there?
all right.
Couldn't be better.
All right, so you guys can see my screen okay, right?
Yes.
So in terms of, quickly where we are in the process, we've had a lot of discussions about the requirements for the site, and we have translated those requirements in addition to going through various inspiration links to come up with a round of wireframes first. This was a black and white kind of blueprint of how we needed to structure the website, not only for the district, but with some variations for a sort of set of templates that would be used for each school to have their own sub-site in a similar way, but extended way from the way everything is put together today. So just to get a quick kind of sense, I know you guys mentioned you have a few things on your agenda for later in the meeting. Were you thinking like 10 or 15 minutes is about right? Is that where you want to be with this section?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, even 15 to 20 is fine.
Okay,
Just to be
great.
able to get a general overview of kind of like what you're looking at, where you're at with the design, why some of the elements we've picked, and again, we can come back some other night, a little later in the fall, with a further update.
Okay, sounds great. So we've got maybe 2/3 of all of the templates that we've come up with in a checklist for what we want to have to kind of organize all the different pages of the district site as well as the school, per school site. So I'll start taking you through now what we have for the main district site landing page. We do have several kind of placeholder images and a lot of placeholder content. So just so no one gets confused, everything you're seeing here is not necessarily a final decision on language, but it is sort of where we're headed in terms of structural organization. So the images, links, some of that will be temporary placeholders while we work with the content team to finalize the content. So just kind of pointing down from the top, since we're kind of going through with a new crowd today, you're still going to have a main selector at the top left corner to let you, as a visitor to the site, choose between any of the school subsites and the district homepage. And today what we're looking at is mainly just JPEG, so there's not a lot of interactive components at this stage. So we've got the new logo. I'm not sure how much you've gone into with that, but that'll be integrated throughout this design process. We've got a main menu composed of the homepage for the district, the programs, which would be encompassing nutrition, athletics, education, going off to the calendar, community, and then we'll have all the links for parents and students. Just general information about the district will still be up here in this sort of info utility navigation, as well as a primary contact. There's also contact information in the footer that I'll show shortly. We're still probably leaning towards Google Translate, so I think that's similar to what you probably have today. And then here's some social links. And this would be the main sort of email component as a link. It may or may not eventually be called Lion Mail, but I think that's a common tool we talked about students, staff, and parents wanting to get access to. So we can have a few main messages. This will be a slider as indicated by these little sliding arrows right here. So they can each be a link or they can just be general. So we'll have to come up with a final list of content for this area, but it will be flexible to change. And we've really tried to encompass various things that will make the site really flexible for different types of content and different types of scenarios, such as the pandemic we're in now. So I'll show you in a minute how we can do a sort of notification on top of this. We have this idea, which is we call the Action Center, and what its job is to give parents and students a way to know kind of at different times of the year, for example, as a new school year approaches or as the school year ends, or as a summer vacation ends, what kind of main tasks people need to kind of be aware of, and if there's a deadline. So this is sort of examples, not necessarily what are the final list of what you might want to have in here. But long story short, it'll be a great way to let people know, here are some things you should be thinking about accomplishing or looking at over the next few months. So we'll have that kind of cycle and rotate throughout the year as new deadlines and things come up. We've had discussions about a mailing list. This may not be something we launch at the initial stage because we still don't have a tool in place. but I think you guys already have a great system for communicating with parents via email, so that may or may not be something we can tie into for that. So to come down the page a little bit more, we'll of course have a section where you've got news articles coming through to the homepage of the district site. This is kind of your quick links, so we'll have the ability to sort of organize it by section. So you've got, for example, student needs and anything that parents and students may want to have quick access to. And if we have a little section perhaps of reports, but this won't be limited to just these two types of areas. As we make our final decisions for content, it'll be a flexible area of the page to incorporate any other links that might be something we need to get to people quickly. We talked about getting some great statistics out of the documents and information that's already been published to kind of highlight to folks in the community what you are able to show with a statistic number. And some of these were designed to be interactive so that if you hover on a certain number, it'll tell you, for example, if 77.2% of students pass all ninth grade courses, we can hover and kind of show, well, is that above or below average, in which in almost all cases for Chelmsford, you guys are really doing a great job there. So there'll be a deeper section to dive deeper to all stats. Here is an events section. So the home page will have any featured events that you really want to be promoting, along with a full list of kind of anything that's up on the calendar. And this will be a quick tab to just change what's in this kind of visual area to just see in a calendar format. If anybody has any questions or feedback or comments while I go through this, definitely feel free to pipe in or bring them up. You guys are doing a great job in terms of coming up with some video content, and I think there have been some ideas floated for coming up with some new content for 2020 and 2021. So as we're producing YouTube videos, we can kind of pick and choose any of those along with any other video content that you'd like to display on the site. So this could be a way to get some visual information across to people there. Down in this section, we have an opportunity to sort of pull back content from the Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook channels. So we may pare it down if we realize the content is a little bit redundant, for example, between Twitter and Facebook. But we have an opportunity to use this layout in a couple of different ways as we finalize the content. So this is what the footer would look like. You've got your basic contact information, logo, social links, and then a great set of additional links for people that you realize they're looking for at just kind of a quick up and down glance. So I think our total list of templates was maybe 13 or 14. So I might have 6 or 7 we can fly through now that we've kind of done a quick overview. The one change you'll see now that I've advanced to the next screen is a area we can communicate a notice box and have that something people can close with a cookie. So this could be where we do, information about remote learning or pandemic situation updates. So it may be the kind of thing that we would use sparingly, but it will be available when you really want to get something important in front of people, but not necessarily have it, on the second or third slide in a sliding area. That's kind of what we're doing here. And then this is all the same. This is just the action center pushed down a little bit. So I'm going to advance here. So this was an example of kind of a heavy-duty internal page of the district site. So this is communicating how the health services content could be brought into a new design. So we'd still have a sidebar where we can show department contacts, reports and information. And this will be, again, really flexible to kind of get what we need into different sections above and below the contact, for example. And as your content developers and anyone who's responsible for working on the website is kind of moving forward, just to kind of give you an example of what you're looking at, it'll be really easy to just set a nice photo at the top of the page, and then we'll have some common kind of background pictures on a per section basis, but both of these images will be able to be changed by anyone who's got the administrative credentials. So this page, as a good example, the health services on the current site, there's a lot of information available, so we wanted to make it so that people would have an idea kind of what they're getting into before they kind of just start scrolling down a page that may be somewhat long in some cases. So this kind of jump to section just gives people an idea of what are the sort of sections of this page. So if you were to click here, it would kind of just fly you down the page and have one of those effects. So here's a kind of box where we're organizing the information you've already published regarding the coronavirus and how it's affected the Chelmsford schools. So it's a lot of the content that's already out there, just sort of laid out a little bit more organized, perhaps. We'll be able to come down and have various sections. So here was another example section, requirements for entry. But we'll help get everything you guys have today into this new site and as needed reorganized to be not overwhelming to people. So there are some subsections to the health services page, so this would let you go deeper into this part of the website. As we're publishing news and stories to the website, there'll always be an ability to sort of have a little checkbox to the right. So if you're publishing news, you might say that this is somehow related to the health department for certain stories. And anytime that's used by the content administrators, they'd be showing up here as well. And we can of course have videos on any section of the site, such as this area. So let me advance to the next page here. So before our last meeting in Chelmsford about the website, I realized there weren't a lot of public images I found of various schools in Chelmsford. So I did kind of take out my camera quickly and get a few new shots. So I have a folder full of images, mostly of McCarthy so far, that I can pass out to you guys at some point if it become useful. But I love how some of the images came out because it was a kind of a gorgeous day, and there's a lot of great kind of landscaping and updates that have happened to the school since I went there anyways. So I've got some good images we can use. And just kind of like the top areas of the site. So this is just an example of the master news kind of section if someone were to click directly into the news area, which I think we'll have under, I have to make a final decision, but probably under community we'll have the news section. It'll be really easy to have pinned or featured stories and then go down to archive news from newest to oldest. Here's the news detail template, so you can get an idea of how those might look. We talked a lot about colors and how we could get the design to come to life. And a lot of the opinions were pretty strong that we were going to stick very closely to the maroon kind of color scheme. So we did try a few things during the design phase, but ultimately there was some executive decisions to go with this color palette. But I'm really excited about the way it came out. I really like the tones, and we incorporated a few sort of shades of purple along with the maroon that are kind of in that vicinity. This calendar sort of template will have these couple of links at the top because we know it's a common use case to get people quickly over to the academic calendar, which is often published in PDF form. So instead of having it kind of below the calendar, which I think is how it's currently organized on today's website, that'll just be a quick way that people come to the page and immediately realize they have access to the current and future academic calendar in addition to events. And we've also talked about how this will be able to aggregate any events from each of the schools in the district out to this main district website. Here's another section where we realize, there may be some other calendars that don't necessarily become something we publish here on the district or sub-school sites, or the academic calendars, for example, like a club calendar or sports calendars. So I know this maybe links to external websites, but we're just trying to be thorough in terms of thinking about people clicking on a calendar and kind of finding a way to get to what they're really looking for, whether it's sports schedules or anything else. Here is an event detail template. So just being aware that anything that you create in the event calendar would be able to have a full page of content. So in terms of the staff section, this is just a kind of preview of how we can lay this out. I think we're still going to try a two-column approach as well, which looks a little bit more like, if I have a quick link to it. This is from the wireframe stage, and this was the two-column layout. So we're just kind of trying a few things to make sure that we get the best possible result. So we'll be sending, I think some of these are new templates too, so I'll be sending over a batch at the end of the day today to the team. But again, this is a template that can be used for any given sub-school site as well. So if we're going to show a team page on any of the school sites, we'll be able to use this template and you'll get an idea of what that will look like. I'll go forward again here. We won't always have to do this, but any team member that we want to highlight a full profile for, such as our superintendent here, or any of the principals, we could do a full page. We talked about having a couple of tabs here we still have to incorporate into the design so that people can kind of quickly go between, you know, some of the social networks that will let you drop in an embeddable box. But we don't always have to do a full bio for people either, so we'll have some flexibility when creating content to go either way. I've just got a few more to show you today, but we're getting pretty close, I think. So this was a part of the site we talked about kind of creating that. I'm not sure if you have any great resources at this point, at least that are part of the actual website. But in terms of when people have the most amount of questions for whether they're parents or students, the idea of there being a quick way to get people to a page that's about whatever transition they're making, going from any year to any other year throughout the school programs. This is kind of going through that thought process of getting some information to people, giving them an idea of what they need to accomplish, and making those links really easy to find. So we can do this as needed for any given transition. Want to make sure we have a nice form library for getting things to people that they commonly are in need of. And these are, again, just some examples to get us started. Resource library, so this is kind of an accordion tool so that we have a way to do either FAQs or resources or anywhere else that we need to use this kind of layout to organize content. That will be in our toolkit for this new site. 13 of 13. So, and this is again, I think, diving a little deeper into imagining we're on a particular school. So just imagine this is now switched out with a particular school, such as Chelmsford High School or middle school. In terms of getting a little bit more modern with the new website, one of the, kind of proposals we're suggesting for creating content on the site, making the site feel fun and dynamic would be getting the activities and clubs represented in just a brief kind of quick page and a quick picture for each. So this is something that I think in former years has been presented as a PDF or a handout. But, we're coming from the position that, we want you guys to feel like this website can be useful as a new sort of technology, especially as students are all getting their own Chromebooks and things like that. to get some information to them through the website and not necessarily, you could do it in addition to handouts, but it may be an opportunity to reconsider, what's web content and what really should be print out. So this will be a fun section to work on for each school, perhaps. Let me just see if that's the full loop here. Yep. So
Brian?
any questions or comments at this stage?
Yeah, Brian, I had one for you. When you were on that last page with the clubs and activities, it jumped out to me.
Yep.
At the very bottom, there was that accessibility piece. Can you just,
Right.
just touch base on that, because this is something that will come up from time to time with our website. So if you could just help us with that, or just overview that for us, it would be great.
Sure. So in getting going with this project, we knew we'd have to cross the bridge of ensuring ADA compliance, which is following the WCAG 2.1 regulations, as I think it's coming from the WWW organization. I forget what their acronym stands for. But long story short, we've found a great partner that I think is going to be the direction that we go with this new website. It's a toolkit from a company and a piece of software which is called Accessibility, and it does two really cool things. One is that it will give us this kind of what you might call a front-end toolkit, and this icon will always be visible. It's just will follow you down the page, so it'll always be in one of the corners at the bottom left or the bottom right. And what happens is if you click on it, it will give anyone who is either visually impaired or using a screen reader software the ability to sort of enhance the site in a way that may help them. So they can increase the font size, they can adjust the contrast to make things a little bit easier for them to process. And it also does something behind the scenes where it employs a what's the word, AI, which will go through the site and help to find anything that might be one image that was uploaded one time that doesn't have a description. So, there's a few sort of big points when it comes to understanding what needs to happen to ensure a website is ADA compliant. And, I can highlight a few of the big ones quickly, but long story short, one of the examples is that images always have to have a description, because if you can see it with your eyes, that's great. But if you're using a screen reader and, one of these pictures just says, picture23.jpg, because that's the way it just happened to be on somebody's computer right before they uploaded it to the website, the AI will go through and attempt to come up with an idea of, what this picture might be of. And I've seen several examples, and it's often really good. So we don't want it to be the first line of defense to make the site really thorough in its compliance, but it's a great backup to ensure that, everything is going to be covered from front to back. So we're going to do the best job we can at while we're moving content from the old site to the new site to ensure that pictures have descriptions, and we've made sure that everything that's a link is clear where that link is going. That's another example of what the compliance guidelines ask us to make sure we've done. But the software is just a great toolkit on top of that to kind of enhance and really make it thorough, that the site becomes fully compliant and easy to use for anyone with visual or related impairments. So that wasn't too much information, but gives you an idea of what to expect there.
No, thank you. That was good for me.
Okay, excellent.
Other questions people might have? What's the general timeline for this work to be completed, do you think?
Sure. So we are nearing the end of the full skin design phase, which means we now know everything that we'll need to build. And so we're just about to turn the corner over the next week or so into the development phase, which is where we'll be building out the structure of the website into a functioning site. once we have all of these templates sort of built in a way that makes them, something we can train your staff on and something we can move your old content into to reorganize and bring it to life in the new site at a staging temporary link, we'll then be able to kind of work with the content team, anyone who's going to be part of that team that's going through each school site and the district site to review and scrub and repurpose old content to make sure that we've got all the new content. So we're basically going into the development phase, and then that will take approximately, I think we're at something like a 6-week cycle. I'd have to look at the contract, but we've got some timelines planned out. And then we go into the content details phase, which just gives us some time to make sure we've got all the content from the old site, from the schools, and anything new anyone wants to get into the site. So that'll probably take another month or so. So, we certainly got bumped back by the pandemic a bit, but I think we're feeling good about, getting this close to complete by the end of this calendar year.
Yeah, there are different milestones along the way, but I'm thinking we should be in pretty good shape by the end of the calendar year for a launch right after that.
Yep,
So,
that makes sense.
well, Brian, thank you very much for spending a little time with us tonight. There's been a lot of work that's been going into this behind the scenes. It's just something you don't always see because it's not live right now. It's being kind of perfected. But I think we're all looking forward to this relaunch when we get there, and I just wanted to be able to show it along the way. Maybe a little bit later in the fall, before it's a go live, we could have you come back and, when all of our own draft kind of stories and pictures and things like that are in there, do another high-level overview for us. But I appreciate you very much tonight taking the time to do that.
Yeah, that would be great. Look forward to it, and thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. So Brian was the last person on GoToMeeting, so I'm going to shut that down, just so we don't have interference. And then if we go back to the regular agenda, so we had finished the special education ELL 504, the special populations group. And the next update for you relates to transportation. So I'm going to ask Joanna to review some transportation information for you. But basically, and again, this is in one of my kind of overview slides we'll do at the end. But as you know, none of us like the idea of having to limit transportation for the fall to school. But when the middle of July, the DESE guidelines came out for transportation, we had to make a difficult decision and start by basically offering transportation to those students who were legally obligated to provide it to, which is any student in the district in grades K through 6 who reside more than 2 miles from their assigned school. So we basically backed out the students who were ineligible at that point to be able to quantify the ridership that we had to provide transportation to for the start of the school year. And then what we did say is we obviously don't want to let seats on buses go unfilled, but we need to kind of strategically figure out how to introduce new groups for eligibility purposes. So again, I don't want to take all of Joanna's, I guess I tend to do this. I don't want to take all of Joanna's presentation. But we have the students who we have to provide to. We think we're going to be comfortable with that. She's going to walk us through a spreadsheet. And then I feel we're at the point where we can add another round of students. And the round that we're going to talk about is adding transportation to grades K to 6 below 2 miles for those students who qualify for free or reduced lunch. Because that's a group that we identify as a high-needs population. Transportation would be a difficulty for them getting to and from school. And, our recommendation would be to do that, then see where we stand, and then possibly look for a third wave or a third group of students to be able to introduce, and keep doing this until we build capacity. But Joanna, do you mind kind of walking us through kind of the spreadsheet, the analysis that you've done, and we can talk about that recommendation?
So there's my cover memo, and then Dr. Lang said the spreadsheet. So right now, the registrations are just K to 6 over 2 miles, and that is 692 riders. And that includes, just as a reminder, 7th and 8th graders who have a sibling in 5th or 6th grade who are over 2 miles. So that 692 includes, there's 38 of them. So there's still more K to 6 over 2 miles who have not registered yet. We estimate that to be about 320. Okay, but that's on the little spreadsheet as we're going across from left to right. That's an unknown because we don't know if you want to ride the bus or not. So then if we expand to K to 6 under 2 miles for free and reduced lunch, we think, based on last year, that would bring the capacity up to 1,150 students. And that would mean 27 buses at the elementary level and 19 buses at the middle school level, which is still under the 29 buses that we had last year that we've budgeted for, just at a lower capacity. So that's kind of, I know it's a busy spreadsheet, but kind of takes us where we are and where we think we can go. And then down below is just a little chart, just an FYI of last year, where we were, 3,438 riders on the 29 buses at all grade levels. I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions. And it's a lot of data, but I think it's a
John, you have a question?
good next step.
And just a quick one, for people, special needs populations, IEPs, people that require bus transit, we're taking those into account, right? So
Well, they wouldn't ride the big bus.
Oh, that's right.
This is just the
okay.
big yellow bus, right? That would be on our special ed transportation.
Got it, okay.
Vans and
As a
stuff.
follow-up to that, though, we would have some students on IEPs who do take regular transportation.
You would.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yep.
I think this is a great place to start, but, is it possible that as we move forward, if we still have spaces open, that we could accommodate some of these students who may not have transportation or be able to walk to school or, find some other ways of getting there?
Yeah, I mean, my goal is to, like yours, get as many kids on the buses to fill every available seat we have. I just think we need to do it in like waves, because even though someone might be eligible, they might have already come up with other plans. The other thing that could happen is, even the students who, like those 320 students who we've kind of flagged as eligible to ride but haven't registered yet, there could be a group that, comes out of the woodwork, so we've got to have a little bit of play. But I think we've taken care of the students we're legally obligated to provide transportation to. So now if we take a next step, again, this is just my recommendation. We need to kind of talk about what the different groups of students you'd want to consider are. The free and reduced lunch students, it's a very quantifiable group of students. There's a specific eligibility involved. We know just historically that these students represent all student groups. So there are some students who are L students. There were some students who are special education students who fall within this cohort. And it just seemed like a particular group that was going to have difficulty getting to school if no transportation was provided. And when I asked Joanna and Peter to run the numbers, it seems like we can accommodate this group. My thought process would be, if we do this, we would then obviously notice this group that this transportation is available to them, give them a period of time to sign up. Then we'd reassess what the bus counts are. We would probably lock into this group for the start of the school year, But let's say we have the bus routes established and we still have 10% capacity on the buses. We would then come back and say, okay, what is group 3 that we're now going to offer busing up to? And we need to have that decision. I don't know that group 3 is necessarily as clear cut as like free and reduced, but we'd have to have that decision or discussion with the school committee with regard to like what's the next group we want to invite on and do we have the capacity? And just continue to do this. At some point, we have to lock into the routes for the start of the school year. And again, a lot of this depends on which model we're operating under. So if we're operating under the hybrid model, again, we're going to have, it's not ever going to be perfect that 50% of the kids are going to come Monday and Tuesday and 50% are going to go Thursday, Friday, as far as transportation is concerned. But this would at least allow us to get the school year up and running, see where our capacity is, and then add, say, like I said, a third tier or a fourth tier. And this would be fluid and kind of a living group throughout the course of the fall until we reach our capacity on the buses. But we're contracted for 29 buses, and I would want to use them to their maximum ability. It's just this allows us to kind of do it sequentially and making sure that we're not overcommitting ourselves and then having to backtrack and take away, again, busing from someone who thought they might be able to have it.
Okay.
Maria, question?
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm not understanding this because we have 3 runs, right?
Well, normally we have,
Yeah, we don't have high
3
school.
runs. We do a high school run, we do a middle school run, and we do an elementary school run. But right now, we would not be doing a high school run. We would only
Why?
be doing, because we're not transporting anyone above grades 7 and
Right,
12.
but in an ordinary school year, we offer transportation to high schoolers as
Right.
well. So I don't understand why we're not offering that at all. So in other words, right now, you have, let's say, a total of 692 students signed up,
Correct.
right? Okay, so they're coming A cohort and B cohort. So on one day, you would have 400 students riding the bus, and another, A, B, A in 2 days, and then you have another 2 days with another group. So in other words, it's not that full number riding all the time.
Correct, but we don't at this point know who's going to fall in which cohort.
Okay, but it would seem to me that if we have a hybrid model, we should be able to accommodate double the numbers. And we should be able to offer it to high school because that's the only run that, in other words, if people are gonna go to school in the morning to high school, in cohort A or cohort B, or even C, if that's what it is, then, they're the only run in the morning. It doesn't involve all the other students from K through 6. So are we not gonna keep the 3 runs? Is this what we're saying?
Yes, when we cut down, because we need to increase the time between runs, because we're going to have to clean the buses between the runs.
Yeah, but I think for some families, this is so important. That seems to be the general gist of a lot of questions is for me to make a choice whether I can send my student or not send my student is whether or not they're gonna have transportation.
Right.
It's that important to them. So I think, and they're right that a lot of districts are accommodating and they're doing it. And this, by having the hybrid, it makes it possible. And also, it adds in the option for the high school students.
It makes it possible, in some respects, capacity-wise, but it doesn't make it possible time-wise between runs. We would have to, again, like when we made that decision, we weren't transporting any students at the high school. We were only even transporting the 7th and 8th grade students who had siblings in the 5th and 6th grade who had, like, they were taking up a whole seat, but if we could put a second person on the seat, we said we would do that.
No, I understand.
But what we're already doing is, for the hybrid model, we're tweaking a little bit the entry time even for the middle school by 10 to 15 minutes to have them come a little earlier, because we need time for the added run for the elementary school. We don't want the elementary school to start much later than 9 o'clock. So the middle is actually bumping up to closer to 8 o'clock. You would then actually have to bump the high school schedule earlier to like a 7 o'clock start, not even a 7:20 or 7:25 start. But it all bottlenecks in the afternoon at the release time because you'd need to be phasing your out times by at least an hour or so between runs, between the elementary, the middle, and the high school. And I forget, Linda, can you just pull up the scheduled stop times for me? But we would have to redesign the end times of the schools to basically be an hour off from each other. And I don't know where the high school would fit in on that.
Well, I don't know how other places are doing, but this is that important that I think we should definitely check to see how we can offer it, because this is the difference between access and no access to a lot of people in our district. And so, I mean, having the 3 runs, I think, is still very important. And I understand about the need for more time, but we should look at how we can overcome some of that so that we can offer the safe transportation in the under the DESI requirements. That high school offering in the morning, I know for sure it makes a tremendous difference to so many families. Some parents would have to do 3 runs, elementary, middle school, and high school. It's that much of a difference to some families and more.
Right.
Some of the EL students have no access at all. And if they're in high school and they can get a seat on the bus and pay for it, they'll do it. So, you know, I think it's that important to look at the schedule and see how we could do it.
Yeah, I'm a little confused because we weren't transporting to the high school a couple weeks ago. Like when we made the decision to not transport 7 to 12, the high school was not getting
But
transportation.
we didn't know what model we were going to offer. When we made the decision about transportation, and we did it right here, and we said that we were going to keep it within the statutory requirement,
Right,
we said we would revisit this once we knew what the model is going to be.
right,
And our decision was not to go with full in school, full return to school,
correct.
which would make transportation impossible other than the statutory requirement. We now have the hybrid model. We know, well, we don't know fully what that's gonna look like, but we know
Right.
mostly that, what it's gonna involve. 2 cohorts, smaller numbers, 70%, possibly 80% of the population of the students returning. So we've got much smaller numbers. I think we should do everything possible to accommodate the 3 runs and look at this and see how we can do it. It's that important for access, in my opinion. We've got a lot of families with these issues.
I mean, we can, again, this is.
We can look at anything,
Right,
right? But I guess the problem is we would majorly be changing even the start and stop times that some people aren't even comfortable with now if we go back and add a 3rd-tier run for the high school. You know, again, I just wasn't prepared tonight, to be honest with you. I didn't think this was going to be part of the conversation. So I would have to go back and look at those schedules.
Yeah.
Again, I just wasn't prepared for this.
You have to change all the schedules because you don't have enough run
I'm
time.
concerned about the end, I mean, as hard as it would be at the high school, I mean, there's actually been some discussion, I know we're getting off topic, but at the high school where they go in around 7:15 or something, there's actually been some talk about, well, if we're not providing transportation at the high school, would there ever be the ability to just move the high school start time back to, say, like 8 o'clock as opposed to the 7:15 time? That would be something that, again, we haven't surveyed staff and students from. Let's say staff and students wanted that. It still would have to be bargained, so the union would have to be involved. But let's say people actually wanted that. Transportation was one of the most significant barriers to moving the high school start time back. So potentially, you could look at that if transportation was off the table. But I can tell you unequivocally, I cannot transport an 8 o'clock start time to the high school and maintain the middle school and the elementary start times.
Okay,
There's not enough capacity to be able to do that.
But that's not something we've even explored yet. I mean, is that more important to people than actually getting the student to school? In other words, it might be a trade-off for some families because, listen, I know, I have 2 high schoolers. They'd love to get up a bit later and get in there a bit later. But to them, you know, being in the school for a certain amount of time is extremely important. We luckily live around the corner.
Right.
But there are a lot of families where that's not true. So I think if you were to change the high school time, I think it would actually impact other decisions, whether people were really gonna do the bus. Let's say a family has a middle schooler and a high schooler, and they've signed up for the bus for the middle schooler, maybe they don't need it anymore, because now they have to bring the high schooler anyway to school. And they're coming around the same time, middle school and high school. So,
Yeah, again, anything can be looked at, right? And I'm always willing to look at anything. It's just if you were trying to align the high school and the middle school start times so that a parent could potentially, drop off at both schools in one trip, it wouldn't, you need an hour if you're gonna add the busing onto the schedule, so I just don't see that being viable. Like I said, I'm certainly willing to always look at any options, but you'd almost be bumping your start time, unless you redid your middle school and elementary school times, you'd be bumping your high school start time earlier from the 7:15 to 7:19?
7:19.
7:19 back to like 7 o'clock to be able to provide that hour. Now, I don't know, number one, how people feel about that. I don't know if, what percentage would be happy doing that to get transportation, or you would actually, alienate another piece of the population who then wouldn't want to go that early and they would opt for something else. I don't know. We haven't explored that.
And if you offer it to the high school, then you have to offer it to seventh and eighth, too.
that's correct.
So now you're gonna bump those numbers up, I don't know how those numbers would work.
You'd have to see how the numbers are impacted, but all the districts that I've seen around us who have a hybrid model, they're offering transportation. And that's because,
Not all offering transportation at the, over the limits, there's been school districts that have actually cut back, that they used to offer K to 12, but they actually did what we did and just cut back to the legal minimum because they don't have the capacity to do the 7 through 12.
but I think we can accommodate a lot more than what this is showing if we really look hard at this schedule. And I know we have a million things going on, but the transportation is truly that important. I mean, I've been receiving a lot of communications, I'm sure you all have as well, about transportation. To some people, this is access. It's the same thing as the importance of the computer, which is coming up next, but I know that.
I think Donna had a question as well,
So
or comment.
we know we're under capacity, so that is why we're looking to offer it to students who receive free and reduced lunches, correct?
That was the suggestion.
All right. But we also know that we have this unidentified number, possibly up to 320 students over 2 miles from K to 6 who have not registered. So if we look at the possibility that we could be adding up to 320 plus the free and reduced lunch from K to 6, we would then be at capacity, wouldn't we, for transportation? Like the buses would be full.
We'll have to see.
Okay, we'll have to see.
Yeah,
All right.
you're right.
We're certainly trying to work towards being
Right,
at
okay.
capacity. The other wild card in this is who's gonna be in A and B.
Right.
It's gonna be about half one and about half the other. I just don't know, even if it's a split, who's gonna avail themselves to the transportation or not. That's what's difficult to figure out.
I guess what I was getting at is, so we kind of really need to know those numbers before we can talk about adding a third tier of transportation.
Yeah, again, my way of thinking about this was just, we know that we're gonna be under capacity, that if we start in phases, introducing additional populations to the buses, we're gonna be able to accommodate more riders. It's not perfect, it's just trying to work towards maximizing your capacity. I see us coming back at some point and talking about like a third round, or maybe a fourth round of students, and we'd have to talk about who the target audiences at that point are. This was just a suggestion because I think based on the data we have so far, we're comfortable, again, Joanna's looked at historicals to even figure out over those 2 miles, some kids just aren't gonna use the bus. Who is gonna actually do that or not. There may be some students, even in the free and reduced lunch, if this is the direction the committee goes in, that aren't comfortable taking the bus. So even though they, would be eligible, they might not end up taking it. That's what we'd have to work out, but we just thought, add some additional capacity, reassess, see where we're at. If we can add a third tier, we would. If we can add a fourth tier, we would. And we would just try to keep creeping up until we hit capacity.
It's also possible that some parents who have not made a decision between hybrid and remote have not registered for transportation. Is that possible? So once they decide, they may say, okay, I've decided hybrid, now I'm going to register for transportation.
Yeah, it's possible, because again, we're looking at about, 60% of our group has registered so far. I don't know if the lack of transportation factored into their decision, whether they chose remote or the other one. They might be, I mean, there's a handful of people that continually like call and email us wondering if you're going to open up additional spots, because that could impact their decision. They'd like to go hybrid and at least have some in-person schooling, but they just don't have the transportation capacity to do that. So again, our thought was just to try to add additional riders to be able to satisfy a certain group, knowing it's still not perfect, it's not satisfying everyone. But then after that Group B was satisfied, then take a look at Group C and Group D, and maybe get at a point where we can kind of forecast that for people so they can get a sense for, it's likely, even if we start the school year, I might not have transportation, but maybe come October, if there's seats, we're gonna readjust. Like, we readjust bus routes frequently from time to time after riders get in there. I think Joanna and Peter would say, you have to just hit a date where we basically establish the runs for the start of the school year. If someone adds on after the fact and there's someone that we're required to transport, they basically get assigned an existing stop. We don't go creating a new stop for them until, we get a couple weeks into the school year, we work the kinks out, and then we might add additional stops, revised routes. But you've got to be able to communicate that to all of the families. So even if their bus stop is off 5 or 10 minutes, that does affect families planning-wise. You want to be able to have enough time to notify them.
John or Jeff, anything on this? Any final thoughts?
Well, what are we doing right now?
Well, tonight,
So,
I think what we're gonna do tonight is decide if we wanna offer busing to those students that are under 3 miles, K to 6, that get free and reduced lunch. I think that's where our decision is in front of us tonight. And then if we wanna request that superintendent or Peter, or whoever, look into other options, we can do that. So I'd like to first, let's handle what's in front of us right now in terms of the free and reduced lunch students, if we're going to add those to the numbers, and I would assume we'll take a vote on that. And then we can.
If there's other options you want me to explore them, just
right,
tell me
you
what
can
they are.
look-
I'm happy
So you can look
to
at
do it.
numbers and things like that, and times, and
So I'll add another comment in here as you're looking at this and what will be offered to, at least somehow to another run for the high school population. I know many parents, it's the return home is the big problem, because you're looking at the middle of a day and people are working. So I think that's very important to look at. There is definitely, we're not doing 3 runs. It doesn't look like it.
No, we're only doing 2.
Right, and we were doing 3. And it also looks like, to me, that we're gonna have half the people that we would have in a full run. So there, in other words, on Monday, Tuesday, there's half, and we don't know exactly if it's half or not. You won't know until you know who's coming and
So we
who's
know
not
who-
coming.
Right,
But
but
it-
we're operating at 25% capacity.
I
We're only
understand that.
operating with 25, kids on a bus.
No, I understand that, so that's 700 students. So 700, if you multiply 28 by 25, it's 700 in my book.
Where are you looking at that?
I'm doing it. 28 buses, 25 students, is that right? How many
Yeah, but
buses do you have?
We have 29.
Oh, more. Oh,
More.
good.
But it's not perfect that 25 kids just,
Okay.
they're out in the same neighborhood where they just all jump on the same bus together.
Well, I understand, but let's say, well, you've got one extra bus to play with now. So 700. So we've got, I just think it's that important to people. All right, so we've got 700 people, 700 students.
Maria,
Your
it's
total
already-
right now registered is 692.
It's one of my columns there
Yeah,
already, so you can kind of see, like, if you take the biome going across, if we would have, we'd need 10 buses, just for the biome with 25 students on the bus. That's kind of the column, the far right columns.
Yep.
Yep, so we.
You see,
but-
like, the column with the 1150 in it?
yeah.
That's, and the far right column to the beyond that, that's telling us like how many. This is a projection based on if we add that additional wave of the K to 6, that we would need, the 27 buses to basically make the elementary schools work.
Uh-huh.
That's typically how we back into like the transportation model. Based on the elementary, it's the number of buses we carry for the middle school and then also the high school.
Okay,
The issue with the high school is really it's the starting time and even the end time, being too close to the middle school.
We
times.
should really think this through, because honestly, it makes a huge difference to people.
I know, I have to say, I would not recommend starting to change the times on the schedules this late in the game, because it would just,
I mean, that's the thing, right?
we are like going full steam ahead with people thinking that this is what the schedules are, and we're backing into schedules. I'm just saying, I think that's gonna be very messy with school starting so quickly.
Okay, so can we take a motion on what's in front of us, which is the free and reduced lunch, students offer them transportation, and then if you want to make a request of the superintendent to look at other options, we could do that too. So, Donna, if you,
Well, yeah, I'm
Oh,
guessing,
you- yeah.
what I'm wondering is if we want to look at the information before we put forth this motion,
which information?
the one that, the information.
But
that
would
Marie-
we'd still include these students in it.
Okay.
We just, I don't think we'd be, anything we do is going to cut these students out of the loop.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Okay, I recommend the school committee add transportation to students, offer transportation to students who receive free and reduced lunch from grades K through 6,
Second,
Under 2 miles.
Who was
under
that?
2 miles.
still second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this particular motion? Okay, all in favor of, doing this? Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Okay, so now what kind of requests would you, what would you like the
One,
superintendent
I'd
investigate in terms of transportation?
Well, as I said, one of the things is I think we need some information to see if it is possible within our schedules and whatever we have available to add in a run for the high school and make that available. And two, once we know who's gonna be in on which cohort, then can we add in more availability
Right.
to the existing schedule that you have here, and even maybe add 7 and 8, but.
Well, that's what we intended to do. I mean, for the second part of
Okay,
your
but
request.
the high school part was
that's what we-
totally not.
The high school part was not part of this.
I'll
so-
be honest with you, I never thought the high school part would never be considered. I always, and I'm sure parents have the same thought in their mind, we had 3 runs, I would expect we're still gonna have 3 runs, if it's at all possible. And if it's a matter of 20 minutes, it may actually make a huge difference to people. And I hate to do this to my high schoolers, but if they had to get up, you know, if that's the only way we could do it, it stinks, but, okay, because access is that important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have voted for a hybrid model, because it's a pain in the butt, okay? I mean, we can see how much work it is, but it's worth it if we can do it safely.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this before we go on to any other items? Okay.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
And we just had one other element on this particular page. Just a lot of questions around community education programming for the year. You know, what we're going to be able to operate, what we're not going to be able to operate. So as it stands today, just again for planning purposes, the community education program, which is at the Westland School, which it shares the facility with the CHIPS preschool program. They are planning, they're prepared, and they're planning to offer their Lions Pride preschool program, which operates at the CHIPS program. So Robin has indicated that for us. That is a program that provides childcare to a number of town residents, but also a number of our teaching and our staff, which I know like daycare and childcare is an issue for parents. It's also an issue with some of our staff. So they are gearing up to be able to properly distance, meet all of the different guidelines within that building, and continue to operate Lions Pride. So that would be a go. The Lions Den is the smaller, kind of half-day, not even a full half-day, little preschool program at Chelmsford High School that works with the childcare program at the high school. That is being suspended for the year. So they will not be offering the Lions Den program at the high school. Again, couple-fold, introducing, you know, kids into the building every day from the outside, the childcare kids, the interaction with the high school kids, it's very hands-on within the classroom. So that would not be running for this year. I had mentioned previously, but just to confirm for people, the extended day programming that Community Ed typically runs before school and after school at the elementary schools in the district. And then they typically operate at one middle school, and both schools can send kids, will not be running this year. So that one is not taking place. We'd already previously announced that, but I just wanted to put it in writing and confirm for individuals. And then when it comes to adult ed programming, they had to shift this past spring to a lot of virtual online adult ed programming. That was relatively successful. Even over the summer, they had a number of their adult ed offerings that worked remotely. So they are planning on starting the fall in a remote format. If individuals want to avail themselves of adult ed programming through ComEd, it'll be a virtual program that they run. Music lessons is something that's pretty popular, primarily for kids, so that will be also happening virtually. And depending on what happens as we get into the fall and the winter, they'll be looking to possibly go back to some in-person classes like the rest of us when we get to that point. But adult ed programming and music and whatnot will be virtual to start the school year. No extended day programs, no Lions Den at the high school. But the key, which a lot of people were waiting to hear on, is we will move forward with Lions Pride. That's the daycare program, childcare program that operates out of the community ed school. So that was my last update from community ed.
And there's still openings?
Yeah, they actually reached out to families recently to find out, who was going to be sending their kids back. I believe Robin told me there were it was an odd number. It was either 7 or 9 openings. And, we do have, I mentioned, a number of staff in the district that I know have been having some childcare issues that we're going to be reaching out to see if they might want to participate in that.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay, before we transition to the next item, which is the technology initiative, can we just ask some questions about?
I actually have a small.
Oh, you do have? Okay.
Yeah, I just have
It's not on there, that's why. I
It's
just
not on
wondered.
there.
Okay.
I just
Yep, that'd be
developed
great.
this real quick.
Great.
It's just 4 or 5 quick slides to talk about just some of the plan options and some of the questions that have come up that I think will, will hopefully help answer for folks the plan model that we have. So these are questions, again, that are consistently kind of coming up for us, and I just wanted to answer, and we'll get this posted up to the website. We'll incorporate these answers into the FAQ document that'll go out at the end of the week. But when it came to student transportation, the students that we're actually transporting prior to tonight for the start of the school year was the first cohort of the first group. And those were students in grades K to 6 who reside over 2 miles from school. So those students are in the queue, they've registered, they're being routed for buses. And Joanna in the business office were working on reimbursing all of the families that had paid for a bus pass who were in grades 7 to 12 or who were in grades K to 6 below 2 miles. So that is in the works. We've been receiving a lot of questions and inquiries about when reimbursements are coming. And Joanna's office is in the process of finalizing those at this point. I don't know if you want to, indicate possible dates.
The best case would be August 28th, and then the second best would be September 4th. It's a big group that I'd like to make sure we do all at once. Over 960 students and families, and over $160,000.
So, quick takeaway there, either the end of the last week in August or the end of the first week in September, reimbursements going out to those families that had paid that were not at this point transferring. Thank you, Joanna, and your staff for processing those. We talked earlier about that second group, which you just approved. So we now will reach out to families that have students in grades K to 6 who reside under 2 miles from school, and they qualify for free and reduced lunch. So that is our high needs population that we're going to try to help in this first wave of additional seats on the buses. So I had a TBD, but you did approve that earlier. So we will make contact with those families and make sure that they know that they're eligible and see if they want to enroll, so that we can get them going and get them in the queue for a bus. We will likely use those two groups to set our initial runs for school. And then as we get into tier 3 and tier 4 and keep moving down the line, we'll make modifications to bus routes as we go, but we'll provide ample notice to parents if the bus route or time, their pickup time or location is going to change. And then we'll start to, over the next number of meetings, talk about, what a third group might look like, what a fourth group might look like. I'll begin looking at some of the high school data for you, so I'll have information for you. But that is the way I would systematically recommend we look to add spots to the buses to maximize our capacity, make it manageable and explainable to the public. But to John's point earlier you had raised, this last bullet is really important. Our transportation discussions have not affected special education students who have special education, special transportation in their IEPs. So any special education student who already had specialized transportation in their IEPs, regardless of the decisions with the committee with regard to mileage, they were always and they are going to remain getting specialized transportation to school. So we just want to get that out for families because, we have had a number of questions from SPED families with regard to, well, if I live over, under the 2 miles, do I get it? So John, they are 100% taken care of. If it's in their IEP, they're continuing on. So hopefully that will address some of the concerns. One of the other things that's coming up quite a bit when parents are making the selection, in their mind, they're hearing hybrid, and hybrid is the option. And I think there's some confusion around the remote portion of hybrid and then the option to just go fully remote as a district. So when we chose to implement the hybrid model, there are the left side of the screen, all of those different considerations that are going into effect. But parents also had the ability to go fully remote, which is the right side of the screen. So what we're asking families to do is if you log in and you actually select that you want to participate in hybrid learning, what that means is you're going to go in person 2 days a week. It's either going to be Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, but 2 days a week of in-person school. And then you're going to participate in school 3 days remotely. There are going to be 2 cohorts, A and B. Again, if you're put into cohort A, you go Monday, Tuesday. If you go into cohort B, it's Thursday, Friday. We will not know what the composition of those cohorts is until people actually make their selection. Because we're going to have to call out the people that are going full-time remote and then basically try to apportion the remaining students. So half of them are in cohort A, half are in B. There's been discussion about just, quickly maybe splitting the alphabet. We also need to make sure that we're aligning, a student at the elementary level with a middle school and a high school, so a whole family's going on the same day. We've had some requests to take a look at, instead of pure alphabet, within a neighborhood, can you accommodate certain students? So once the students are actually split in cohorts A and B, there will be a system to that. But we are going to be trying to, as best we can, accommodate students who might need to, for whatever reason, flip-flop between a cohort A or B to begin. A lot of that work is going to have to happen at the school level, knowing the kids and the cohorts and the schedules. But we will try to be as accommodating as we can. We will try to accommodate as many families and students in the proper cohort. We obviously can't allow the cohorts to become unbalanced and have too many students, coming Monday, Tuesday, and not enough Thursday, Friday, because we've got to maintain our numbers. But I just want people to know that there is nothing definitive, because some people in their minds are saying, well, if I'm A to L in the alphabet, I'm automatically Monday and Tuesday. And if I'm M to Z, then I'm automatically Thursday and Friday. We won't know exactly what the split is until we actually get all the registrations done and figure out which students are going remote and which students are coming in person. And we hope to have a better idea of that information by the end of the week.
Can I ask a question on this? For the 3 days remote, is that going to be synchronous or asynchronous learning? So what I guess I'm getting at is, so you have the Monday, Tuesday group.
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes parents were thinking that on Thursday and Friday, their students would participate in the class remotely. But in reality, you're actually seeing the same instruction just to a different cohort of group on Thursday and Friday. So actually participating remotely may not work for them. Does that make sense?
No, I lost you.
No.
I'm sorry. Let me try that again. So 2 days are in person, 3 days are remote. Are they going to, on the 2 days, on the Thursday and Friday, so you went Monday and Tuesday, are they going to participate on Thursday and Friday,
Synchronous.
remotely, okay, into the class.
That is my
Are they
recommendation.
synchronous?
That is, okay,
That's what we're working on.
okay. So I
Can
guess.
I explain it?
Sure,
Or
go
just from
ahead.
my perspective?
Yes,
So
yes.
if I'm in cohort A,
Right,
I'm physically in school Monday and Tuesday.
right,
If I'm in cohort B, when cohort A is in school physically Monday and Tuesday, I am, remotely
okay, I got you, yeah,
logging into the class, watching the instruction, participating in what's happening remotely, synchronously with what's happening in the class.
okay,
Thursday, Friday, I'm in cohort B, I'm physically in school. Cohort A is watching the instruction and participating in the
Okay.
class.
so it's synchronous.
Synchronous.
Okay, thank you.
Wednesday is still a little bit, to be determined, so we're working on that. We need to carve out some time within the day for like structured meetings, planning, prep, development, all that type stuff. Again, the other thing is when we put out, this is my next bullet, like the sample schedules, I think what we should have parents really paying attention to or focusing on more is like the big pieces of the day, the start and the end time. We're gonna have to make tweaks because that was like a snapshot of a particular schedule. But when you get into, a literacy block, every grade level within the school can't have the literacy block at the exact same time because you have to pull special educators to maybe go in and provide small group instruction. You might need to pull a reading specialist in to do that. And if you only have one body, you can't have kindergarten, first, second, third, all having that block at the same time because you're competing for the resources. So someone might be doing a literacy block when someone else is doing their math block because you've got to make availability of the staff that you have. So some parents, as they're reading the schedule, are not seeing that it's going to change a little bit. I would look at the schedules that we posted as more as like instructional blocks. And the time within those blocks is going to be changing a little bit based on what grade you are, what different activities are happening in the school, when special ed support can go into a classroom, when L support can go into a classroom, if a student needs to be pulled for a service. So the schools are going through the schedules now when we actually see the students that are going to be coming in person to figure out how the logistics are all going to work. I would focus more on beginning of the day, end of the day type times. And then over the course of the next couple of weeks, when the different cohorts of students are put together and we know the different service delivery, that's when things are going to become a little bit more crystallized within the schedule. The other thing that we got into last spring is, again, everyone had the best of intentions putting the initial schedules together. We knew we had to tweak things as we went. So after 2 or 3 weeks of a particular program, something was working really well, we kept it. If we found that we had to make an alteration, like we did make an alteration to some of the specials, based on like parent feedback and staff feedback, there is still going to be a little bit of play over the course of this fall as we roll out this model because we haven't done it before. So this is our first time doing it. We want to see what's working well and obviously keep doing it, and we want to be able to make some adjustments, but I wouldn't get too hung up on exactly what every minute of the day is. Give us some time to be able to work that through, because again, if you're seeing just a snapshot of a particular school schedule, you've got 5 different grade levels, even at the elementary level within that schedule, and we've got to make sure that we can move the blocks around to make sure that we're meeting all the student needs. So I would pay more attention to like the beginning time for drop-off pickup, and let us work a little bit on the scheduling piece. What we're trying to get at, which is my next bullet, is for the about 4 hours of time that the students are in the school, really focusing that time on the core academic subjects. Again, elementary school, I'm just using them. An hour and a half long ELA literacy block. It incorporates reading, it incorporates writing. Our new reading program, our phonics program, is going to be in the ELA block. We're going to have a mathematics block. In the afternoon is when we're looking at doing more of your specials and possibly even say like science, social studies, things along those lines. We want to take advantage of the 4 hours or so that the students are in the buildings and really focus on core academics during that time. And then when they're home, when they're all working together, because in the afternoons, everyone is going to, again, be synchronous. So the whole class is going to log on to the computer at the same time, do an afternoon activity, have a closing, Linda, what do you call the end of the day?
Like a meeting, like a,
They do a morning meeting, do they call it afternoon meeting?
well, they could call it whatever they want, but yeah, it's just a check-in.
Whatever they call it in the afternoon, the goodbye, and, you wrap up the day, and you kind of go on your way. So, that's what'll be happening, but the special time is really being moved that way. If families picked the full remote, they're going 5 days fully remote. Again, we provided some sample schedules, but those might have to change as well because we have to figure out what staffing model we're going to be going with. And this has been a common question that's come up, Is a staff member going to be teaching in the hybrid model as well as in the remote model? And I honestly don't know at this point yet. What we have to do is, as much as we have some students who the the in-person instruction is not going to work for them because of either health reasons or concerns with family and whatnot, we also have staff members that have similar concerns. So they may have a health issue that would prohibit them from coming to in-person learning. They may have someone in the family that they're caring for that makes them more susceptible, so that they're hoping for some type of a remote option. We have to wait until Friday or early next week until we actually figure out which cohorts of kids are going to want to go fully remote and who are going to want to participate in hybrid to figure out how we're going to best pair that staff. It's not going to be perfect that, we have 4 classes of 4th grade at a particular school and 25% of the kids, want to go remote. And one teacher in the 4th grade cluster happens to want to go remote. So you just pair up that one teacher from school X with those 24 kids and the others go alone. It's just not going to work out to be that perfect. But what we're going to have to look at and see is within a particular school or even grade level, you could end up in a situation where they are always going to be Chelmsford Public Schools teachers, but it just may not be, if the numbers don't support that, a teacher from your particular school with your cohort of student. And we won't know that until we actually know how many kids are signing up for remote and how many want the hybrid option. That's a question that's being asked, quite frequently. I will have a much better idea, hopefully, the next time we meet with regard to, again, how many of our staff have requested or we can try to accommodate in a remote setting, how many of our kids have requested, fully remote. It's going to be a little bit of a work in progress over the next couple of weeks. But what I can tell families is we are absolutely utilizing our teachers under either scenario. Appropriately licensed teachers for grade levels. We just need to take a look at, again, even on our staffing front, who potentially can't physically come to work and what their licensure is, because we might need to use them in a different fashion. The other thing that I want to throw out there is, again, the responses thus far have not been, perfectly proportionate to grade level within the district. So, we're not seeing 70-30 at the elementary, the middle, and the high school. There are more students at the secondary level, particularly the high school, who want the hybrid option. So I don't have the exact numbers right now, but there are more students that want that. It is likely, it's possible, that if we end up with those kind of numbers, and let's say only 10% of the high school kids, I call them kids, the high school students, want the fully remote option. If you have your class of 24 students, if only 2 or 3 of them want to be fully remote the whole time, the high school may end up being scheduled as normal, that you have your 20 kids, you split them in 2 cohorts, you've got 10 in A, 10 in B, and those 2 or 3 kids that want fully remote are just fully remote the whole time. They might be with that teacher and with that cohort of students and not be considered for like a secondary track, because number one, the numbers don't warrant it, but as you get to the middle school and the high school level, because of the course specificity, the leveling, and just the number of pure offerings, we may not have enough staff to basically, or enough student request or need to have a staff member, teach a totally remote program that's not aligned with the rest of the high school. So that could be an outcome of this, but I honestly just won't know, and it's not like we're withholding information from people. We won't know until the students all make their selection on what they'd like, and we work with our staff to try to figure out, who's coming back to work, who may have an issue, can we accommodate the issue, and this is all going to happen over the course of the next couple of weeks. But I want to stress for families, these are our teachers. Under the remote model, this is not like a computerized instruction, because I've heard that from a couple of different people. It's not like a canned electronic program that kids are participating in. There are our own teachers that they're going to have FaceTime with, whether it's remote or in person. It will be our real instruction, and that is regardless of program. So if you pick remote or you picked hybrid, it's our own teachers delivering that, and we're gonna work to make sure that they're licensed teachers and that we're taking care of the masses of students and staff. Donna, did you have a question?
No, I think that part of people's concern is, there's a couple things. One is that, we had the Friday deadline, so I think there's a lot of questions and concerns about,
Yeah.
How is this all going to look for my child so that I can make the most appropriate and best decision for my child and my family. And then, the other is, trying to make arrangements, because in either one of these scenarios, people are going to need to either adjust their work schedules or find childcare.
Right.
And we're running out of time, to be perfectly honest with you, and I think people are feeling very anxious because there's already limited childcare resources. And then, I think people are struggling with, what's gonna happen with their own employment. If, now they have to take several days off from work and things like that, and, what do they do in this situation? So,
Right.
I think that, that was a lot of the themes that I was getting through in
No,
my
I get
emails as
that
well.
from email. It's a little bit of a catch-22 though, because if parents don't make the selection, then we can't really figure out what the appropriate staffing model would be.
Right.
So it's this balancing act of, trying to give people as much information as we possibly can, but at some point getting the decision so that we can lock into some staffing.
Can I just follow on to that? So let's say somebody picks hybrid by Friday, or, whatever, and you go through it, and you start assigning, and then we figure out more of the plan. Will you let people move back into remote if they're like, that isn't gonna work?
Yeah, I mean, what I said earlier in the meeting is we do need them to kind of lock in their decisions so that we can make some staffing adjustments. If you ended up picking hybrid, it is a heck of a lot easier to go from hybrid to
For
remote
remote, but the other way.
than it is to go from remote.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the other way. I'm just
Yeah.
talking, okay, this doesn't work.
And again, hopefully, we're not dealing with the masses. I don't see us having 10 or 20% of people I do think have a good sense of what they already want to do. If it's a handful of people that either have concerns or questions, again, like I said, I'm not tracking them down on Friday. We just ask for Friday because if people know what they want to do and they can log it in, it just helps us. But we're going to start reaching out to and actually, counseling families and trying to help them make a decision next week if they haven't yet. So maybe between the, this meeting, the informational session we have, the FAQ, and when they actually see how this shakes out for them and their students, it'll help them make a decision.
Now, will the curriculum be the same in both the remote and the hybrid models? Will they have similar assessments? And that's the question we've been getting, like,
Yes.
do people don't want the remote to be a
Watered down version
Watered
of
down
something.
version,
Yeah,
exactly.
no,
No,
not at
it's,
all.
I see it being the same curriculum, the coordinators and the staff have been updating, like, say, pacing guides. A lot of this is gonna be a work in progress, though. Again, we're starting on day one, and we're gonna get now 170 school days, not 180, but we're gonna get 170 school days. We're gonna have to make some improvisions along the way. But the remote or the hybrid model will be following the same curriculum, Chelmsford Public School teachers, pacing guides. Again, we might have to adjust a little bit as we go, but it's not a separate curriculum. It's not like we're gonna have kids that are out of line and we're gonna have all this makeup work to do later. It's the Chelmsford program, delivered by Chelmsford staff. It's really just a different venue or a different format.
The other question that keeps coming up from parents is why we didn't go with a full day in the hybrid model. Because having this midday transition, there was a couple concerns that came out of that. First, how does a parent
Right.
leave work in the middle of the day to get their child to be able to bring them home? And the second is for students who may be able to get home more independently or have transportation, are they going to be motivated, after
Right.
lunch to be able to, log back in and participate in the final portion of, their day. Is there any way we can go to a full day? Is there, maybe you could explain what the rationale was? Because I think, as I said, people are concerned about the transition, childcare. You may have siblings watching younger siblings that may interfere with their own ability to be able to, attend to their classes, special education services. The whole idea of specialists and, electives and things like that in terms of, what are we going to do? How are we going to provide for that? That was a big question.
And a multi-part one
Yes.
at that. It was something, obviously, that was discussed. And I think I'm not saying that we can never get there. Even like the question earlier about if we only start 4 days a week, but there's a cohort of students that are already self-contained and they could go 5 days a week, could that be on the table? Yes, I'm open to discussing any of those once we kind of launch and figure out a good, benchmark to be working from. The thought process kind of ties into another one of my bullets around, the half-day piece was keeping cohorts of students contained within the school as much as possible. So if you have those 8 to 10 kids in second grade at the school, the days that they're in, basically, they're going to be in their classroom with their instructor. And this is happening at the elementary school level and really the middle school level to the greatest extent possible. At the high school level, it's just unmanageable because, again, the kids have different programs that they select. They have different levels. You might be honors math, but, college level English, things along those lines. So it's just too difficult at the high school level, but elementary and middle school, we really wanted to try to keep the cohorts of students together. When it got to the point of like lunch and recess and specials is when the kids start to leave their cohort. And basically, if we're going to go to a cafeteria and introduce them to, say, the rest of the second grade or even second and third grade, sometimes you have multi-grades get together. The phys ed, physical education, the different programs is difficult. And I think we would just end up being more susceptible to risk, and the risk level just in doing that increases. So our thought process was if we can really keep a contained program within classrooms or within cohorts, we have a better chance of really properly running this program safely. That the more, we integrate additional groups of kids, if someone did contract COVID, whether it's a staff member or a student, now you've got multiple groups having to go out as opposed to just a particular classroom. It was really just a measure to be restrictive, keep cohorts together and be able to better manage the cohorts.
So why don't we just keep them together and have the specialists come in, have them meet in the classroom, those kinds of things?
Linda, go ahead.
So one of the guideline pieces is that our students have to be in rows facing forward, which goes in direct conflict with how we typically try to work with our students. So keeping them in a classroom, so this is the thought process around not a half-day release, but like a modified release time, that if we're going to keep them in this model of this classroom and either a specialist coming to them, the teachers coming to them, that's a long day, right? That's a long way to really give them everything that they need and keep them engaged. So the idea was if we can get some movement within that day, get the core subjects in at the beginning, send them home, there's the movement piece, and then have them re-log on with us, that would help with the engagement piece. A full day of that in a classroom facing forward, not being able to leave except for your, couple of times, that's one thing. The other piece was also when it came to, originally we were looking at the 3 feet, which nobody really, felt comfortable with, went to the 6 feet. You still have to feed them in those classrooms. You can't move them out. So that's just yet another risk factor that is involved in trying to make sure that we had those kids have the ability to be able to eat during the school day, whether it be a snack, whether it be full lunch. The high school would have had to have run 4 lunches. We would have had to modify all the lunch time at the school, so these kids would have lost academic time as it is, because you would have to then truncate how many kids could go into lunch at a certain time. It just became a management piece and also an engagement piece.
No, I understand, but I am concerned, like I said, about, what some parents are gonna do.
Yeah.
Right.
This is a big, big concern in our
Yep.
community about how am I going to leave work? And we're gonna have teachers in our own district who have kids in our district that they're gonna have to figure out a way to get their kids home. I guess I was hoping that maybe by extending the day, that we would be able to allow parents to be able to have a little bit more time at work and not put such pressure on them to have to leave only after a few hours to come get their student, and put them at risk for losing their job and being able to provide for their families.
Yeah, and I absolutely hear what you're saying. I think, and John, I think said this for me, we're making like the best of bad. I forget how you phrased it, but like,
Sea of bad choices.
we're trying to pick ones that are like most manageable. I don't think any of us like this. I think I was driving to work on Monday, the weather was beautiful outside. I would love nothing more than just to start this fall off for like a regular school year, and unfortunately, we're just not in that dynamic. So I do still think, introducing students at the beginning of the school year to their staff, letting those connections happen, makes a lot of sense. Putting safeguards in place so that we can sustain that model, I think makes sense. If we get into it and, it's working really well, I think then we could think about, adding. I don't think anyone is going to be mad at us if we add time, but I think we potentially, if we go too quick and, the day was too long, or, we had too many students in rooms and we ended up having to shut down for whatever reason, I think then we run the risk of people being upset with, we started on this and then now we have nothing. I think it would be easier to, add on or lengthen a school day, add a day to particular clusters of students if they would benefit from it, and kind of monitor that throughout the course of the fall as we roll the implementation out.
On the model, we're still dealing with those first few questions there, those two, right?
Yeah, I only went through the first one.
You're on one? Okay, so when we look at this model for hybrid and remote, another very common question, what Donna just said is a very common strength throughout all the emails. And I understand why we have to limit the amount of time. And I think it's a big thing, but for safety, it's that important. But now, in terms of, don't tell me I just forgot my train of thought. I did. There was something else about the hybrid model that I wanted to talk about. I'm sorry. It'll come back to me.
John, any question? Oh, one more answer.
Were you done? I didn't want to.
That's okay.
You still thinking?
Go ahead.
Oh, you're
It'll come
thinking?
back
Okay,
to
I
me.
didn't
Don't
want to,
worry.
What's the, just on full remote, not full remote, but the people that are remote, what are the, do we have class caps, like, on the sides there?
50.
50?
No, I'm teasing. No, they're gonna be a regular classroom size,
all right.
low to mid-20s.
Okay.
Manageable, in line with what the rest of the school numbers are. But we won't know again until we figure that out. That's where we need a little bit of the flexibility, though. What if we had a particular, say, again, elementary school, that had a disproportionate number of students in their grade level that decided they wanted to go fully remote? And another one obviously was lesser. You may end up in a situation with elementary school A and B, those kids having to share the online teacher, but the experience is going to be the same or similar to the hybrid. So we're looking at the low to mid-20s for all those classes. I was just joking.
And,
Go ahead.
no, if you have another
And
question, go ahead.
I just had one more thing. So just in terms of quarantining, I know we have more to go over
Yep.
with this, but you said your families are going to try to keep them in the same cohorts
On the same days, correct.
on the same days, so that's good. If one family member tests positive, the other, you're going to precautionary,
So
Quarantine,
that
like-
will be handled when we have the medical group in.
yeah.
But there's a whole,
When's the medical group coming in?
well, we've got to discuss, do we want to invite them to a school committee meeting?
Yes.
And have them actually review us? Or would we like to have like a separate webinar type thing so that we can get some family input with questions as well?
Why
and do
not
it then?
both?
Excuse me?
Why not both? We can do both.
Yeah, it's really just time, and is it going to be redundant for the questioning? But I can talk with that group and we can figure that out.
Yeah, we really got to start talking about quarantining and what the policy is going to be and procedures. So.
All right, can I go back to my slides? All right, so maintaining cohorts within schools, again, minimizing travel. That's particularly important to us at the elementary and the middle school level. Again, the high school level, it's just not possible. But that has been a question that's come up quite a bit. Having some kind of a face mask policy, I'm just flagging it for you now, later in the agenda, under the policy updates. Mass Association of School Committees did put out a recommended policy for masks. One of the things that's come up is the DESE guidelines, and the DESE guidance basically requires a mask for students in grades 2 through 12. We've received a lot of questions from parents about, why not K and 1? I've surveyed around what other districts are doing. I've talked to Peggy, and Peggy's talked to our Board of Health, and they really feel the recommendation should be for K to 12 to have students wear masks. So when we get to that portion of the agenda, that's the recommendation before you. But I think by actually having a mask policy and being able to share that with families this week when they're making the decisions, that's a very commonly asked question, and I think that would be a best practice for us to implement. So we can talk about that a little bit later in the evening. School start and end times, again, this is something that, mentioned. Look at them when you're looking at schedules. Just don't get, too deep into the actual schedule itself, because there are some play within the different instructional blocks. They're not all going to be perfectly aligned. This one, to Maria's point earlier, say if we were to add transportation, you potentially would have to move a start time earlier than it currently is. We've actually had, particularly at the high school level, several emails from individuals that have indicated, well, if we're not going to have transportation, would it make sense to have the high school schedule moved back so that we're not starting at 7:19, but we're starting at, say, 8 o'clock? These are all things that I think, can be looked into. I really don't know where the staff or the students would feel or fall at this point with regard to that. With regard to the staff, if we were to make any more than like a 10-minute time change, earlier or later, it's an item that does need to be negotiated, so that we would have to negotiate that with the union. I don't know, again, where people stand on that, but that is something that's been talked about quite a bit.
I think another thing that about start time and so on was activities and also sports. So we don't know yet what's happening with that, correct?
No.
So if those are not going to happen,
Right.
a later start time may make absolutely no difference in terms of those things. But
Well, it wouldn't impact them, right?
I know, but it impacts the busing. So for some people, the busing thing is really big. It's a difference between, is my child going hybrid or not?
Yep.
My thought came back, and can I say it real quick?
Sure, yeah.
On the model. I've also gotten a lot of emails about this. For those who opt to go fully remote,
Yeah,
in the elementary level especially,
yeah,
if they are going to have a totally separate teacher in another school,
yeah.
and then they choose in the next quarter to return to hybrid, or we have a vaccine, life is grand, and we all go back to school,
Yeah.
they basically would be assigned to which teacher at that point?
There's gonna be an adjustment, right? So, I mean, if the remote program is probably still gonna be, absent a vaccine, right? The remote program is still gonna be running. So if the student wants to move from the remote program to the in-person program, and let's say this is at the elementary level, not the high school level, because the high school might be different, then they may be introduced to a new teacher, like in their home school. So if they were by them, South Rose Center, Harrington, they would be at that school, and that's where we need the time to be able to figure out where we could accommodate them, but they would be placed in a cohort at that school. Unless the whole cohort dissolved and went full in-person, it wouldn't be the same teacher. Now, at the high school level, again, if we end up running that different scenario, and a person ended up going, a student ended up going from full remote to in-person, and it's the same cohort of kids and it's the same teacher, there'd be no issue. It would
Right.
really just be a spacing issue.
It's the elementary.
I just don't know where the numbers are gonna line up elementary-wise.
Right.
That's the hard part.
So what people have been bringing up is the idea that if a teacher is going to, has 23, 24 students assigned to their class anyway, and if 4 of those students are remote and 20 of them are part of the A and the B
Yep.
cohort, then essentially that teacher still would be teaching both the remote
Right.
and the, just because they have to do it
Yep.
synchronous anyway.
Right.
The problem with that then is tracking all the kids that are not in there in the class, both in cohort B, who's out there, and also
Right.
cohort C. So then maybe team teaching or doing whatever, and again, that's something to bring up in your negotiations and what's going on.
That's where the numbers become difficult at the elementary level. Again, if you were looking at, 2 kids or 3 kids, it may make sense to do something similar to the high school. But if you have a situation where, it's, let's say it held to the third, right? We have that 24 model, so you get 24 students in the class, 8 of them decide they want to be fully remote, and that leaves 16 to split between the 2 cohorts. So you have 8 in cohort A and 8 in cohort B. I would have a very difficult time as the teacher, having 8 students in front of me and 16 students online. I think that would be very
Absolutely.
difficult. If it was a difference between going from 8 to 9 or 8 to 10, that might make sense to keep it within the cohort and within the school. But I honestly just will not know what those numbers are gonna shake out to until we see the results of the staff, the results of the
The
student
survey.
selection.
Yeah.
And then also, staff to figure out, where our staff are at.
Right,
But, and as soon as we know, we will obviously tell people.
thank you.
Technology devices have come up quite a bit, and Bill Silver, our technology director, has a memo in here for us later. But we will be sending out, I'm just not sure if it's going to come from the district or if it's going to come from the individual schools, but we are going to try to accommodate students who need devices in the remote fashion. So we've talked about this in previous meetings. Our 101 initiative, we already have those computers physically in. So all of our incoming 5th grade and all of our incoming 9th grade students are going to receive the new devices. This year's 6th and 10th keep them, so 50% of the district, middle and high school, is taken care of. The Chromebook carts at the high school level, the Chromebook carts at the middle and the elementary level are being broken down so that those devices can be distributed to families who need computers. We have somewhere in the vicinity right now on hand, I want to say Bill said about 4,500 units in total. We obviously have about 5,000 students in the district. What we're going to ask is that any families or students who need a laptop, obviously request a laptop, and we're going to get them a device. We do have an order in for an additional 2,000 units. It's just a matter of every single district in the state has an order in for computers, and I just don't know when they're going to come. It'll likely be sometime this fall. So if a family does already have a device for their student and they don't have a need for a device, we're not just going to give one to everyone. They're going to have to ask for it. They're going to have to sign it out, very similar to what we did last spring. But we're hopefully that the families that don't need the device to start with will help us get there. Bill did say, you know, if we have to further break down, like we have some iPad carts and things like that, to put a piece of technology in everyone's hands, we'll continue to do that until we try to get everyone with a device. But we are waiting for that order to come in. At that point in time, we're going to be fine. Everyone would have a device, as well as if we ever then have to re-outfit the carts, we would have devices for the carts. One thing we need to keep in mind, though, is if we're giving all of our devices out to the students, obviously primarily to use at home, we're not going to have devices in the school. I don't have a second set of devices. So students, you know, if they're going to use a device at school, they're going to have to bring the device with them the 2 days of the week that they're in.
Absolutely.
Or if they leave the device at home, it'll be like any other situation where you left your book at home or something like that. I'm not going to have extra devices in the school to be able to give out to students. So there may have to be that device going back and forth with them. But Bill actually really does think we're in very good shape overall, and we're preparing for that, the laptops to be given out in relatively short order.
I would think, this is my comment here on technology, for safety purposes, that you would not want to share devices. It would be extremely important that the student be required to bring their device and keep that particular device, whether it's their own, because we don't have enough
Right.
at this time to give it to them, and it should be a Chromebook, because that's what they need to be used to
Right.
if they have to go into full remote, which is a very high possibility in this coming year that we're all going to be remote at some point. So I would think, one, for safety purposes, two, for the reason that you want to know what you're working with, where you can access information, how to use it, all that, it would be extremely crucial right from day one that a student has a device, either their own or what we've assigned to them, and that they're required to maintain it, bring it into school, have it with them, and sign off on one of those contracts. I think it,
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I'm just saying that if, it'll be like nothing else, if someone forgets their book or their lunch at home, then we're not gonna have a device at the school for them. So
Wow.
we're gonna have to, you know, expectation-wise,
Until-
work through that.
Until you get an order. The fall, maybe.
Yeah, but we're still never gonna be in a capacity where people can just leave a device at home
Right, right,
and
right.
have a device at school available to them. But we're in very good shape, and we'll get a little further into that in Bill's report. But like, that was a question that was coming up, are you gonna make a device available? And the answer is yes. Are you gonna have multiple devices available, per kid, per family, if people need them? Yes, we're gonna be in that situation. We're just gonna ask, obviously, it's gonna be a sign-up, you're gonna have to fill out the consent form, you're gonna have to take care of the device, and in the end, you are gonna have to return it.
So in terms of distribution, are you going to have kids pick them up before the school year, first day of school? Or-
Yeah, he's planning to release in waves, so I think actually next week is when the 5th and 9th grade, which is the big
Yep.
cluster, are gonna get them. And then we're gonna get a communication out to families, basically, to, that's the one I don't know if it's gonna come from the district or the school,
Okay.
to ask if they need the device. And then I believe what Bill plans on doing is having the devices available at the school, just because it might be more convenient for families.
So people just
And
go pick it
scheduling a
up.
time for them to drive by and pick up their device. We do have that extra couple of weeks when only the staff are gonna be in and not the students before the kids start. So I can confidently tell you that the kids will have them before they physically come. I just do not know if it'll be the 31st. So it might be happening, on or right after Labor Day, that they'll get their device, but they'll be ready for the start of the school year.
Okay. Thank you.
Will the kids be able to bring their backpacks to be able to carry their Chromebooks in and things like that to protect them? And, will they be able to bring that type of,
A backpack?
a backpack?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a question that came up from a lot of
It's
parents.
probably not gonna be, we're not gonna be using lockers or anything, we'll be using the backpacks.
Just put them on the back, okay.
Yep.
So,
Oh, yeah,
yeah, that was
backpacks are
actually a question that a lot
It's
of people
because of
had.
safety.
Yeah, there's no way, otherwise everything would just be on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I agree. As I said, it was just a question that, that had come up in several emails.
I've
Yeah.
seen that too.
But
Yep.
the reason, and that's a very good question, because that was immediately what, my students asked me. It's like going grocery shopping. What do you do with the packaging? So when you have your backpack and you carry it around everywhere and you expose it everywhere, hopefully your laptop's in it, but you're exposing that thing everywhere. So parents are gonna have to think through with their student what to do when they get home and then when they're returning to school. The other question is books and sharing the materials. So I'm sure you're gonna get questions on that and how to address it. I believe that the new textbooks that we have in elementary are not fully online. So it means that you're gonna have some hard books that you're gonna be touching and so on. And you're gonna be sharing that possibly with cohorts, or is it only for you?
They're online.
They're now online?
They're
Okay,
online, yep,
then
the
it's
teacher
gonna
would
be
flip their-
accessible in the technology. So even more important from day one to have the technology and not have to touch the books.
Right, the teachers can turn around and project off of their
Yeah.
own computers, and they can do that as well.
Those are the kinds of questions, the nitty-gritties, that you're probably gonna get a lot of questions on from parents who are concerned on which model to choose and what risks to take in that.
Well, just last couple quick bullets. Some questions about, will communications go out if a staff member or a student tests positive for COVID? Yes, Peggy, our nurse coordinator, is developing like the standardized letters that we'll issue for that. The letter will not, for HIPAA reasons, it will not say, Jay Lang, tested positive. Where we're actually, as a district, in the event that someone in a classroom did test positive, whether it's a staff member or students, we're basically taking that whole classroom out of the equation and we're quarantining that whole room. They receive a letter basically saying a student in this classroom tested positive, you're now going to be quarantined for, X number of days, 14 days or whatnot. Here's the procedure you're going to move to. It'll be remote learning for 2 weeks and blah, blah, blah. But yes, there will be notification and we will be tracking, obviously, anyone that did test positive. It'll be coordinated through Peggy, our school nurse supervisor, as well as the Board of Health. That's who tracks and contract traces, and they will be working closely with us to identify, to kind of John's earlier point, which they'll speak more eloquently to, who needs to be concerned about quarantining, and so we'll have that session just so that you can have that comfort level knowing of what the response is. But they do have a whole protocol as to who will be notified, how. It'll be tracked. We're going to track it internally. Board of Health obviously tracks it as well, and we'll be able to share that with you. And then lastly, question about just PPE, personal protective equipment. Again, the district, even when it comes to masks, everyone is recommended to wear their own mask to school. The district on the school buses, as well as in the offices, are going to have disposable masks similar to what most are wearing tonight on hand in the event that someone does not have one. Gloves, face shields, masks, gowns, the whole deal. Those are district provided issues. So we're not expecting families to provide that. The only thing we're asking families to do is to send their child to school with the face mask on. But again, we're going to have backups in the event that a student needs that. And that kind of my frequently asked questions that have come up.
Okay.
Do we have a standard for, like, if a student brings in their own, face mask? Are we going to make recommendations about what it should be like, 3-ply or?
Yeah.
And for a medical exemption, will students wear a face shield instead, or, do we have any information on that?
So the standard recommendation is no less than a 2-ply mask. Again, Peggy, will have this all outlined. It'll be communicated to families. What was the second part of your question?
If the student has a medical exemption for a mask, will
Oh.
they be required to wear a face shield?
I honestly don't know. I believe that's the, it's would relate to the disability or the need of the student. But, that has come up. There were a couple of inquiries from parents that have indicated, well, if someone is not in the class, for medical reasons, going to be wearing the mask, am I going to be notified? And no, I do not think they're going to be, because that would be then a HIPAA violation to basically be saying that another student in the class had a medical condition and won't be wearing it. If we went into a meeting together and you didn't have a mask on, the child can report that back to the family if they want to. But as a district, I don't believe we're in a position to basically, because of that confidentiality, send a notice home saying so-and-so has a medical condition, they're not wearing a mask. It's highly recommended that if you can't wear the mask, you wear the face shield, you wear some type of a covering. It is a high standard to not be able to wear the mask. A doctor's note is required. Peggy and her staff have been working on this. So yes, it's going to be a stringent standard to meet. I really do envision the vast majority of students will wear them. And when we get a little bit later in the evening to the mask policy, there is basically an exclusionary language that if someone just will not comply, aside from the medical reasons, that they'll be moved into remote learning until they can comply and wear their mask. So it would be taken very seriously at the school level.
Okay, on the quarantine question, just at the high school. High school is a serious thing, because if you've got a student who tests positive and they've gone to 5 classes and they're not always with the same students, then you've got 5 classes quarantined. Everybody that student has been in touch with will be quarantined.
Yes, like I said, the more we talk about this, I'm going to ask the medical people to come in, because there were just so many different questions
Yeah.
on this. In a classroom where the student tests positive for COVID, that class and teacher are going to be out for the quarantine period. If they, again, we're going to be taking attendance in every class to track down which kid went into the class, seating assignments and all of that. But yes, there is a situation where multiple classes will have to go out if
Yeah.
a particular kid within the class tests positive.
Yes, okay.
All right. Other questions? I know there's a million questions, but other questions people would like to have addressed tonight?
Few. Go-
John?
Yeah, I need a minute.
Okay, Jeff, anything? Maria?
But there's always questions.
There's a lot of
That's
questions.
right.
I think
Right
that's the
now-
thing, is there's too many
Right,
questions.
there are too many questions, and they're gonna do a few, FAQ.
Yes, but we're gonna do like an FAQ to try to hit all the major questions. But I really do encourage, if people have specific questions like about their own student, if it affects like an IEP or if it's a particular medical condition or whatnot, all of our staff, most are here all summer long, but everyone is back in the district now. So if you have a relationship with your school principal or assistant principal or, special ed liaison or whatnot, we're all back at this point. You definitely could just reach out directly and have a conversation with that contact, who probably has more information about the individual needs of the student than I would. I have no problem talking with people about, general kind of responses and things like that, but I don't always have all the details of individual students or their learning styles and needs, and I often then have to kind of refer them to the school level. But over the next couple of weeks, we're all going to be accessible to try to work through these decisions.
Go ahead.
So I just think it's important, if you can, at your information sessions, have that information available for parents who are new to the district, who are coming in for the first time, who don't know who to contact, or might be transitioning to a different school. So, just making the emails available and the outreach available for the principals of the schools and who you think they should be able to contact, I think would be imperative.
Jeff, you had something?
I think the key is going to be the 2 sessions that you have with the parents this week in the FAQ. And even if we've answered questions tonight, you'll still put them on the FAQ. It's FAQ, right?
Yeah, whatever the common ones were, yes.
I'm old. So,
Frequently
so
asked
that would be the thing, that even if we've addressed them tonight and people miss the meeting, we'll still
Yes,
have
we're
them
going to try,
addressed.
and it's going to be a rolling document.
Right,
So
okay.
like, as more things come up throughout the course of the opening, we're just going to add to it.
Right.
And just try to have folks go to that document first to just get a general flavor for their answers. And then if they have something that's more specific, just, reach out to the individual person to have their needs addressed.
And if we haven't addressed your specific question, we're keeping track of it. We have a running list of probably about 150 questions, and we just try to condense them down tonight to try to cover as much as we can, but, we'll try to address as many as we can in as many ways as we can.
So one thing that has come up is I've noticed I do get some emails, and it kind of parlays off your point there, but from parents about specific student needs. And this is kind of the point now where parents can reach out directly to principals
Sure.
for their student.
Oh, yeah.
So they're available, Dr. Parks, all the different principals.
Yep,
throughout the
so,
district.
most staff, are around most of the summer, but we all kind of come back, full-time. We the first 2 weeks before school starts. So yesterday was our first all-day back in the district together. So yes, your building principals are back, for sure.
Special need coordinator.
AP, special ed liaisons, yep, we're all back in the district.
Okay, so for those things, people, and I
I
think that,
just think because again, I have no problem with someone calling me, but if I don't know the particulars of their student or what the
Right.
question is, and they have a relationship with, say, Dr. Parks, I would just reach out directly to the school.
Yeah.
And talk through them and have them help make the decision.
yeah, and I think just as a larger point, I don't know if all parents realize that school committee members really can't comment on specific children, right? Like, we're policy, we work through you work with the principals, and they'll get a much faster answer if they just work through local principals who are now available.
Whoever they have a connection with,
Yeah.
because, it could be the principal, the assistant principal, they could have a good
Right.
connection with the social worker or the guidance counselor in the school. Reach out to whoever you're most comfortable with, because, again, we're getting to the point where, like, some of the questions are just so specific around their particular
Right, and
children.
that's kind of what I saw. Yeah.
I don't even know the details. It would be hard for you to know. So I basically just serve as the liaison to put them in touch with whoever they need to at the school, so that they can talk through their issues.
Okay, thank you.
My questions were more general, and some of them you may be able to answer tonight, and some I would just recommend that we include in the FAQ. But are we doing anything for our grades that we're transitioning, the 4th and 8th grade, for example, around having them visit the schools prior to starting so that, so that they're better acclimated, especially the high school kids where they may be changing classes?
Yeah.
I don't know, but it is a concern for parents going forward.
I can get you a definitive on that. I know, I overheard a conversation today just with the schools, because we had our planning day together. The high school was talking about, how to modify their, the freshman mentor program. And I know at the end of like last spring, typically there'd be move-up ceremonies, from the 4th grade to 5th and 5th to, 8th to 9th. I can get you more information on that. I know at the individual school level, they are addressing that, and they're going to be directly communicating with their families what that's going to look like. Linda, if you have anything specific to add, you
Yeah,
can.
no, they were talking about different videos that they could put together. The mentor program specifically came up today. Could we get those kids in, prior to even this, because the start date's gonna be different, right? We don't even know what that date's gonna be. And then, like, different videos that they could do to bring them in. The good news is, in the spring, a lot of the schools did get around to the schools, to, at least they saw who the new principal was gonna be prior to all of us not being exposed in school. So that, not that that's gonna be perfect, but it was at least to put some eyes and and faces together of who's who. So they're working on just coming up with some creative ways to handle that and see how that works.
The high school had a video right at the end of last year with teachers and students
Yep.
welcoming the incoming ninth grade. It was
Yep.
pretty, it was
And I
really
know
good.
the high school was able to get down to the middle schools to see those
Yeah.
kids
At
before
the
they
high
came up. Right now, like little offshoots that are happening, there's virtual read-alouds that are happening. I know that Diana Fulrita and Donna Omabono are doing that for their incoming kindergarten students. Typically, they'd go to the house, give them a new book. They're not necessarily always doing that. They're now doing some virtual read-alouds, so they're just coming up with different creative ways to access the students.
I can tell you personally that at the high school mentee program, throughout the summer, they have already been introduced to each other. And I know that many of the mentors have made an effort to meet in a distant way and so on. And they've even toured the outside of the high school and then done some things like that with their mentees. So that has started, but I see your point. And I would add to those videos, an introduction to each school and how the student should consider wearing a mask, coming into the school, sitting down, traveling within the school and the high school, all of those things. If we can put those together, I think would be essential.
And just another one to consider, I don't need an answer tonight, but, around our attendance policy, and I think over the last couple of years, we've really encouraged, good attendance, planning vacations around the vacation times and things like that. But parents have concerns about, attendance going forward. So, for example, student test positive, siblings are now out, there's connectivity issues, these kinds of things that may impact attendance in schools, transportation issues, childcare, how will this count against their students, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. So if we could just answer some questions around that.
Yeah, we're kind of leaning towards being more lenient.
Students have to come to school. I mean, I don't think we can, we don't change the attendance policies with DESI, like the
No, there are
students are
DESI
required to
ones,
come,
absolutely.
to come to
But-
school.
But on the other hand, I think that we do have to recognize that these are extraordinary times and that there may be, like at remote, for example, if they
Internet.
have connectivity issues
Well,
and they
yeah,
can't be
that's,
there.
you're gonna deal with
Right.
those as one-offs.
I guess what we're
Right,
asking,
right.
are you allowing teachers some latitude, if it's to make up work if, the internet went out for 3 hours? Like,
Yeah, of course, I mean, teachers
but
would
that's
then work with
always
students, but
happened.
they still have to come to school, and
yeah,
some.
no, I understand.
Okay.
I don't think that, you're not asking about them showing up to school. You're talking about, the power went out in South Chelmsford.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a lot
you
of
did
different
today.
things. I
Yeah.
mean, I think
Oh,
that,
I know.
we're putting a lot of pressure on families, and I think that we have to be aware of that. And, some work schedules may not allow for a midday pickup, and so the only option is for them to stay at home that particular day. And I think we have to be working with these families to support them and to make sure that, it's important that the kids be in school, but sometimes things are gonna be beyond their control. And I think we have to find a way to help support them and not penalize people.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, you have somebody that works full-time and has to bring their kid to school one day and they don't have internet at work, because it's gonna happen. I mean,
I think the biggest issue is just the communication between the family and the student and the teacher to, our teachers are very understanding. You just have to, tell them what's going on. And I've never had a situation here where a teacher hasn't worked with a family or a student to try to make up
Agreed.
something.
Yeah,
The
I agree.
communication piece is the huge piece.
I think, I do want to say this, and I certainly feel the same way, that all of this has certainly raised my anxiety levels. And, I'll give you an example. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking, my students are always having to sharpen their pencils. I'm going to be washing that sharpener all day long. I mean, these are the kinds of crazy things that I'm thinking about. And normally I probably, I wouldn't give that a second thought. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm thinking about
Mechanical
that too.
pencils.
But, like I said, these are the kinds of almost ridiculous for me things that I get, laying in bed awake all night long, running over. And I think it's important that we recognize that families and staff are feeling the same things. And the more information that we can provide and the more support that we can provide, opportunities for communication, I think that it's going to reduce the anxiety. So, I would feel remiss if we didn't acknowledge that this is just an incredibly stressful process, even just around choosing hybrid and remote. You're just afraid about making the wrong decision.
Well, the unknown's always gonna cause anxiety, and
Right.
there's no set end date when there'll be a
Right.
vaccine. And I think that was one of the reasons why we had lost sleep over making our decision, is, you know, I think, having been in the system as long as I have, there is flexibility. There's always been an attendance, and the key is that if there's an issue, that you communicate
Right.
and let them know. And I think we all do realize the anxiety, because
Yep.
I wake up in the middle of the night worrying about what decisions we're making, and so I think that's really understandable. And and Dawn is right, whatever we can do to allay as much anxiety as we can. And I think we're trying to do that. It's just, there's so many variables, so many different scenarios.
Absolutely, and I think, like, for example, and this one, really kind of got to me. I was thinking about, the distancing that we have to do, between staff and students, and I'm thinking about, well, what do you get a kindergartner who can't tie his shoes? Or, he needs help zipping up his pants, or, they have a hard time getting their mask on, or have the occasional accident. What's going to happen? And I think, this is, as I said, the kind of things that parents are wondering as they're making this decision between hybrid and remote, because no one wants to put their child in a position in which they're going to feel bad, and neither does a staff person, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I totally can see a staff person saying, "Oh, 6 feet, what the heck, let me just come here and let me tie your shoe," and, and, these are the things I think that parents and staff worry about,
Right.
so, hang on, I just got a couple more things. I did have one question. Have we worked at all with the Department of Public Health around having testing available in Chelmsford
Right.
for people who want to receive it? I know that sometimes there are programs in place for free testing,
Right.
but is there any option, and I guess I'm referencing an email from Mr. Henderson that I would ask you to check out, just some ideas around, and programs that may be available for us to have available to staff and students if they want to be tested prior to the start of school?
Yeah, I truly don't know on that one, as far as like an open, free one at this point. I do know that Peggy has identified several sites, and there is one, at least one in Chelmsford, if not two, where you can go for COVID testing. There used to be like that free drive-through
Right.
at the, at
The
Cross
cinema,
Point.
yeah.
That's since closed. But, yeah, I mean, obviously testing access and the contact tracing is gonna be important. Will follow up with you on that. I don't know off the top of my head.
In that same vein, that type of questioning, one of the other things that we had talked about in the past that we haven't clearly addressed is, what's the metrics when we're going to decide that we're going to go fully remote? Is it when it's 5% on the community transmission? What is it? And did I get this wrong? And I'm sorry, sometimes I'm not hearing everything 100% here that's being discussed. I listen to the meeting again because it's better with a microphone sometimes. But did we talk, are we having a separate meeting on the safety and the
Well, I wouldn't call it safety.
quarantining and all that?
That's more like health, kind of like how we're dealing with health situations and things like
Yeah.
that. So I talked before this meeting, I was contemplating, should we have a separate session to talk about it? Should we do it during a school committee meeting? I'm gonna go back and talk with the health people and figure out how they wanna handle that.
Yeah, okay,
But one way or the other, we're gonna handle that.
that would be good to then get those questions in. Thank you.
All right.
And then, just a couple last things. I'm wondering if it would, if we have a facilities checklist, and what I mean by that is, we've checked that all the windows open properly, there's a hand sanitizing station, that the desks are 6 feet apart, that we've tested the air quality. Are we doing anything about air purifiers? I've read very mixed things on that. In other words, it's not, it's an extra layer of protection, but it's not necessary,
Right.
is what I've read, basically.
I've read the same. I mean, what we've done with the HVAC systems is obviously, done a regular preventative maintenance on the units. We've replaced all the air filters. I think I mentioned whenever the systems would accept the higher grade filter, we put those in. When they're not, we're gonna be in a routine of changing out the regular air filters or whatever the highest capacity filters that they can take at a more frequent volume. So that's how we're addressing that. We have not looked into separate, air purification systems as some other districts do. I honestly read conflicting reports on the effectiveness of that. Brian in our facilities department, he's been kind of the lead on purchasing all the different PPEs. We're gonna have the hand sanitation, the pump sanitizer in every classroom and area in the buildings. Yes, we're very good on that. He's in the process also, that we went out to bid with our contractor custodial cleaners to provide some extra services both during the school day when students are in the building and even in the evening time for extra cleaning and that Wednesday cleaning. So I can relay to you at least what the cleaning plan is. Under that scenario, I just don't have it with me tonight,
That's fine.
but I can share that with you.
And the last thing I want to say is I think that a lot of parents are concerned about their students' social and emotional needs going forward. And I hope that when we get back to school, whether it be remotely or in the hybrid model, that we're taking time to be able to touch base with kids, really some significant time to kind of see where people are at and make sure that we're getting them the support that they need. I am very worried, for a lot of our kids. I think it's been incredibly stressful. I think that if we can even set aside some of the content for a very short amount of time and address this so that we can get a measure of where kids are at on the off chance that we go out remote very quickly. I just want to make sure that we're very attentive to those things. And
Right.
I'd rather sacrifice a little content and make sure that our kids are in as good a shape as they can be, or that we've gotten them the help that they need
Right.
before we can't do it again.
Yeah, and I think that is the importance of actually trying to have that in-person contact at the beginning of the school year before we inevitably, would ever have to go out. That has been like a central focus of our work for the last 3 or 4 years, is all the social emotional learning piece. Our different tiers of response within schools. We've got teams dedicated to working on, addressing student social emotional needs and wellness. When the different schools come in to do the presentations, that's a lot of the highlight of their work. It's the relationships with the students that they're making. It's the setting the expectations at the beginning of the school year for, what good behavior looks like in the school, what good listening is. We see the videos of, this is how you should, ride in a bus. And so I see us actually having, and we've started to talk about this a little bit, but, like a COVID type series. Like, this is how we're going to behave within schools. Here's how we're going to properly social distance. And that will be worked on. But that has been a central focus of ours. I don't see that changing. Our staff is fully on board to support not only the students' social emotional needs, but also I think this is going to be positive for staff to get back with some camaraderie and support from their colleagues in the buildings as well. The remote, teaching was isolating for not only kids, but a lot of our staff members as well.
Absolutely.
So this will be, a challenge as we all come back together.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right,
Okay.
thanks for the update.
I just have a couple of other things. We already kind of touched on this a little bit, but you do have a memo in the packet from Bill Silver. I won't read the whole thing for you, on the one-on-one Chromebook initiative, but we're in very good shape again for that rollout over the course of the next 2 weeks. He's going to be setting up the Parker, the McCarthy, and the high school with the Chromebook devices for the incoming 5th and 9th grade students. So those will be deployed. In Bill's cover memo, he just reviewed a few of the other highlights from different work that was happening over the course of this summer. We are going to divert any of the additional Chromebooks that we had purchased for carts, to basically go out as devices to students for the start of the school year, and we'll backfill once we get our order of 2,000 units in. Bill does note that we did apply for and receive about a $250,000 grant over the last couple of weeks, which is a matching grant to buy technology. So in my conversations with the town manager, we're going to match that $250,000 with $250,000 of the CARES money that came into the town, that $3 million grant. So that's going to provide us another 2,000 units, and that's coming outside of our traditional funding strategy of using the school choice money to fund the one-on-one initiative. So these are really an extra 2,000 devices for us to help within the district. But all in all, we're excited about going into year 2 of the Chromebook initiative, and Bill just provides all of his documentation here. Again, I won't read it to you, but we're in very good shape for that.
The process of picking them up will be appointment by appointment type of thing?
You know what happens, again, instead of doing one centralized location at the high school, I understand that they're gonna do 3 smaller locations. They're gonna do McCarthy, Parker, and the high school. And typically, I believe what he plans on doing is sending out like appointments in like windows almost of time, just to control the number of people coming. But he's doing it staging over a number of days as well. So I think we should be in good shape for that.
Right, any questions on technology?
I do want to just say good work on the
Yeah,
technology
excellent.
piece.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done improvements on the internet connection, we're getting more stuff, better software.
Yeah,
Just,
no, they're doing
ticket
a
system.
good job. New ticket system we went in this year.
Yeah.
You know, we're in the process of the full security upgrade at the high school. That's in works. They did upgrade the ticketing system, which I think is gonna be.
It's friendlier for parents, I guess.
What's that?
I heard it's friendlier for like.
The
people who
ticketing
don't-
system?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
ticketing.
he's really excited about it, even for like his,
He is.
he is as well, for
I'm
like
gonna put
even,
a ticket in when I get home.
yeah, even his, like technicians, as far as like I guess the reporting capabilities within the program, much superior to the one he previously had.
Nice.
So, if he's happy, I'm happy. So, that work's going on. But no, they did a lot of upgrades this summer as well.
Yeah.
Once we do get kind of reestablished for the fall, you know, Bill will come on and do a kind of a year in review for us, as he typically does. So he can go a little bit deeper into some of these topics.
And I know you've talked about that the teacher will be equipped to be able to broadcast to the students that are at home
Yep.
via various devices.
Yep, a number of different devices, and I think that's what a lot of our, even like the 10 days, or up to 10 days of being in the school year is gonna be working on. You know, kind of mock lessons using the technology, you know, troubleshooting, things along those lines.
Right, anything else on technology? Okay.
Nope, Brian joined us previously for the website design. So the next 2 were just kind of talking points about school committee self-evaluation, and then both of our goals for the year.
Yeah, I mean, usually, this is typically the point of the year where we'd step back and do sort of a self-evaluation of how the past year went, and then use that along with looking at our past year's goals to come up with this year's goals. It's a little bit different this year, obviously. Kind of all the work on the strategic plan kind of came to a screeching halt, and a lot of times we kind of base our goals on that, as does the superintendent. So we talked briefly about, you know, maybe for this year coming up with more short-term goals to get us through this year, rather than the global goals that we've been doing in the past. I mean, you know, most of our goals are big picture type of goals. I think this year we might have to concentrate a little bit more on the small picture. I mean, we could still do a self-eval if people think it's worth a while exercise, and I can get that ready for next time. But as far as goals and things, I think we kind of need to narrow it down a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I talked to Dennis about this, and I'm obviously willing to do whatever we wanted. We were hoping to be able to kind of kickstart some of the work on the strategic plan and bring that to conclusion over the course of the summer. But the summer got totally consumed with the return to school planning and the working groups and whatnot. And I honestly don't know if I would even want to be launching, you know, the kind of the normal strategic plan under these times. So we talked a little bit about, you know, do we put together just like a some one-year goals for myself and the administration and the school committee to be working on collaboratively around the rollout of whatever this hybrid remote learning is going to look like. That would give us time to just get into the year and really focus on making our learning program, whatever it's going to look like, the very best it can be for this year. A lot more kind of operational goals. And then as we get into the winter and the spring, assess where we're at. At that point in time, if we want to, again, depending on the climate and where we are, if we want to revisit kind of concluding the strategic plan, there might even be elements of the strategic plan now we want to go back and readdress, because realizing that the environment that we're working in is different, you know, going forward, it's always going to be different than it was. In looking at doing a longer 3 to 5 year plan, maybe a year or so out. But that if we actually focus on this particular year in front of us and some deliverables that we know we want to get accomplished, kind of handling it that way. So I'm amenable to that if you guys think it would work. It wouldn't tie us into a long-range plan with so many unknowns, and we could really focus our work on being the very best we can be for this coming school year.
I
Thoughts?
agree. I agree.
Okay.
I'd like to do the short-term
Yeah,
goals
I
and
agree.
really focus our attention on this year. I think anything else would be not a good idea. It would almost be, I hate to say it, but, you know,
Irresponsible. almost.
yeah, thank you, that's the word,
Counterproductive,
irresponsible.
too.
But I also do think we should do a self-evaluation.
I'll try to put that on the next agenda then to get that out, and that's a fairly easy document to fill in, and we can take a look at, you know,
There
I
were,
think we're operating, and then, you know, we can work on what kind of goals we see, you know, for this next year, so.
there are such important things, but somehow each one of those important things right now has to be put in perspective. And that's about it. But I think it's very important, like tonight, the discussion on the website, I actually had somebody email and say, what is this? I think it was just it was difficult for people to follow the feed and so on. But it just, you know, it was just so different from what we've been talking about, a hybrid model and the remote model and all of these things, and yet it's so important for what communication and everything else.
Well, I think,
You
and
know?
that's the challenge that we find ourselves in. I don't think we can think back to just kind of like day-to-day managing the pandemic or the remote learning we're under. We do still have a lot of things that are
Yes.
taking place in the district. I mean, we have, say, the website redesign, we've got different facilities projects and capital projects that we want to move forward on. There are a lot of like nuts and bolts type projects that are still happening and that need to happen. It probably was a little out of context for the viewing audience if they weren't realizing what we were doing and why I would switch to that, because all of our meetings have really been consumed about the return to school recently. But I'm hoping that once we get beyond the return to school, that we still have normal business we have to conduct. And I think that's why maybe if we do, you know, if I can kind of put on paper what the top 3 to 5 more project-y type goals that we have to get accomplished this year are.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can share that as well, and we can kind of talk about why we're still doing, because the business of the district still has to happen, and I think we still have to be looking forward. At the same time, realizing we're managing day-to-day functions within an abnormal environment or situation. And maybe we can, you know, help the viewing audience with that. I do think once people pick whatever model they're gonna start with, and we actually start to roll out schooling for the fall, I think people are gonna realize we're getting back to some more normal at that point.
Yes, and one thing that has happened as a result of this is the number of folks who have become very involved in making a decision, and so are following what's going on here in more detail. And to me, that's wonderful. That's terrific that people are doing that. But I think for school and for education and for quality and so on, what you said is very important. We have to have those goals.
Right.
We have to move forward somehow, and at the same time, try to do the best with what we've got.
Right.
So, yep.
All right,
Okay.
so that's the direction we'll head in.
That works. And last piece of the agenda this evening for me, when I talked to Dennis, MASC had put out a number of different kind of pandemic-related policy adjustments for you to consider. So I included that supplement in your package. And then probably most timely, within the last week or so, they put out a draft document with regard to a school committee policy on masks as we're going back into the school year and face coverings. So the last couple pages of the attachment, even if you don't act on the pandemic-related policies tonight, I mean, you certainly can talk about them and act if you want to. I think it's important for us to act on the mask and the face covering one, because that is weighing on people's minds. So I included the MASC draft face covering policy, which is EBCFA, at the back of the document. And then I went into it and I actually incorporated Chelmsford-specific language. And in that, which again is the last 2 pages of the document, what I recommend you consider is requiring the mask and the face covering for all students in grades K to 12 but not requiring it for our preschool. So basically, anyone in the CHIPS program in the Westland school would not be required. Now, we have a lot of families, even of, say, preschool students who wear masks. There's nothing saying that they can't. And it might even be something as part of like social skills and social stories that they put together at the school, because everyone's wearing masks these days, they may. But again, even within the ComEd portion of the programming over there, we have really infants as young as 18 months that clearly won't have a face covering on. So I think it'd be very clear for the district if you adopted K-12. Those are all our elementary, middle schools, and high school. And we exempt basically the Westland School, which is our CHIPS and our, our community ed programming. So I basically incorporated that language into the last policy in red, just so that you could see that. But again, just for discussion purposes.
Why don't we take on the mask policy first, because I think that's pretty clear cut.
Yeah, and I don't know how you feel about it, that's just my recommendation.
So,
That one's
anybody?
Either read it or just.
No, I don't think we have to read it, but I hopefully everybody read it already. It just lays out who should be wearing masks and what kind of exemptions, what some of the reasons for being exempted would be. Talks about students providing, families providing students masks, and things about violations and how they'll be dealt with, so. Any,
It does say that there is a physician note required for exemption.
Yep.
I did have one question. So, and I don't think this is gonna be an issue, but let's say you have a teacher that just refuses to wear a mask. I mean, are we working that, is that part of the negotiations?
A
Well,
teacher?
Yeah, like a staff member, anybody, not even a teacher, an
It's
admin.
even, I mean, we would work with the teacher, obviously, but it's even covered within this policy that it would just fall under your regular staff
Regular staff,
policies for
alright.
any kind of like discipline or conduct.
I'm concerned with enforceability, right? So it could be admin, some, janitorial, stuff, whatever. So,
talks
Yeah.
about visitors as well.
visitors, yeah, things like that, yeah.
It's all it's at the very end of the policy,
Right.
but it would be viewed like as any kind of other personnel matter.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions on the policy or comments on the policy? All right, we'll take a motion.
I recommend the school committee adopt the adapted MASC policy on face coverings for grades K through 12, and it would be EBCFA.
Second, emphatic second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further questions, comments? Okay, all in favor of adopting the new policy on face coverings? Aye.
Emphatic aye.
5-0. Okay, now the other policy is a little bit broader. I think it's mainly in place to just give some flexibility. I don't know if, Jay, you want to talk about what you see as the benefits or the drawbacks to that type of policy? It just, basically just allows more leeway in adapting policies to the current situation, so.
Yeah, I don't have a general problem with any of our existing policies. I think when the MASC puts policies together, they're obviously thinking like statewide dynamics that are happening even within communities. I feel I have a very good relationship with you, and that if I determine that one of your policies is, gonna be very difficult to implement during the pandemic, or, I see an issue with the policy, I would have no problem, even if I had to act before a school committee meeting, acting and sending you an email and saying why I'm acting the way I am, and then having us take it up at the school committee meeting. I personally don't see too many of these situations that are gonna bump into anything that we're doing. It basically is providing some cover for the superintendent to be able to act outside of the policies in the event of an emergency. I personally think we have a good enough relationship, and you would trust me enough that if I felt in my heart that I had to do something different that was going against your policy, I would do so, I would tell you, and then we would talk about it. So I personally, from my level, don't feel that, this is necessarily necessary for us at this point. There is gonna have to be some tweaking that gets done. I mean, there is some stuff in here about, say, the school calendar. But we're gonna handle that through negotiations, and ultimately, the revised calendar is gonna come back to you. Time on learning, grading and retention, I think these are all issues that we can just deal with. I don't know that we necessarily have to go amend the policy. The other issue is, if we go amend a policy, we've got to go back at some point in the future and change it again. And, you know, you don't want to, not that you don't want to forget about doing that, but, again, I don't see personally, from my perspective, unless you do, the need to really go change these at this point. But I'd leave it up to you. I mean, do you have a different read?
I don't, I just didn't know whether you felt we're gonna need that level of flexibility over the next few months.
I personally don't. I'm very comfortable just working with you under the existing policies, and if there's an issue that comes up, I'm comfortable telling you there's an issue.
Right, any other thoughts?
Because we can always add a policy later. If we're like, this isn't working, we need to have a policy for it, we could do that, so. We can
Yeah,
do
I
that.
think this is more for like, you know, if you had a policy in effect, and, you know, there's a lot of school committees that only meet once a month. You know, or even there are some that only meet quarterly. So if you were meeting that infrequently and I didn't have access to you, and we could find a policy that, you know, needed to be changed or adopted or amended or whatnot, it would give me the ability to basically act in what I feel is the best interest, and then after the fact, come to you. But I see you every other week, and most of the stuff that we're discussing has been flagged already in reopening plans. And I would have no problem if something came up in an emergency situation to call each of you if I had to, and explain what was going on, tell you why I was acting, and then we put it on the agenda for the next meeting and we talk about it. If you agree with me, great. If not, we go back the other way, and, you know, I don't think there'd be any hard feelings on either side. So I'm comfortable operating under the way we are.
My only concern, and I don't disagree with you, but I think my only concern is that, what I'd like you to do is take a look at these and see if there's anything that we have to address in our FAQ, you know, around attendance, around discipline and things like that, because I don't want to find ourselves in a position where we make a decision, but our policy says something different. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, we
Okay.
find, you know, we're suspending a student for a particular reason, but it really isn't necessarily, you know, under our policy, but because of the current conditions, you know, this is what we're faced with. I don't want to find ourselves in a position of, you know, having to adjust the policy after the fact.
Right.
What would your example be?
I don't even,
Yeah.
I can't, so let's take attendance, for example.
Attendance, yeah, it's a good one.
You know, that, you know, we have the attendance in here, hang on, I gotta find attendance. So, like, for example, in this, that, like, in our frequently asked questions, okay, that we say that, you know, one of the things that we recommend is that if, students are, you know, facing, difficulties in being able to attend school on a regular basis, or suffering from chronic attendance, that, you know, that there's some type of communication that's happening between the family and the school. I don't want us to end up in a situation, you know, where we can, that we find ourselves in a bind with a family because the policy says one thing, but we're doing something else because of the current conditions.
All right, I mean, if you'd like, just again, because look at
It's so
the
general.
timing and the extent of this, I don't mind going through these recommendations for the next meeting and seeing if there are specific ones that I think, you
Yeah,
know, could be an
yes,
issue.
perfect.
That'd be great, yeah.
Perfect.
But I'm just saying, like wholesale, I don't
Yes,
see
I
any
agree.
big
agree.
need to change stuff.
All right, so everybody comfortable with that?
The big one for tonight was the face covering, so I appreciate you doing that.
All right, where are we now? Any liaison reports?
We have one, oh, it's not a liaison report, it's the library,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
that on August 20th, so we have some members of the graduating class of 2010. We've taken a very active role in trying to improve some of the issues that we've been facing in the community around racial diversity, racial sensitivity, and just being more aware. And on August 20th, there's going to be a book group, and I would encourage people to check out the library website, so that they choose to participate, they can, and I believe that there are copies available through the library as well. So the first one is at 11 a.m., and it's called Hair Love, and the second one is at 12 p.m., and it's called New Kid, and I would encourage people to, as I said, check it out and participate if they can.
Great. All right, any other liaison reports? Any new items, action items?
When we do our parent information sessions, can we record those, please, so people?
Yeah, they
go
will
back?
be.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll be recorded and posted to the website.
And how's notification gonna go out for?
Connect Ed, so people will get an email. It is like a go-to-meeting link, so they're gonna have to join two separate links, depending on which one they want it to go to. And then we'll try to get some like Facebook-type bursts out tomorrow as well.
And the other thing, do we want to put a placeholder in for next Tuesday to have another meeting if we need it? Look, I'm happy to meet as often as we need to answer people's questions.
I'm okay with it too.
What?
I'm okay with it too,
Yeah.
as well.
You know, whatever we have to do, you know, to make sure that the information is getting out to parents. so
My
we
only
can
concern
answer-
is I don't know if we'll have the numbers
We won't,
by
but
that point that we can really start to get in the nitty-gritty of what it's starting to look
if
like.
you ever feel like you need to meet,
Okay,
we just need 48 hours to post a meeting.
right.
But like, if we're not even closing until Friday, we're gonna take a look at the data Monday morning and start to, contact families who haven't selected. I don't know that I would have much more to say Tuesday night than I would, if something comes up and we need to meet towards the end of the week. I could tell you, as long as we have the 48 hours, we could post it. But,
Yeah, I'd like us to
Getting up-
remain flexible, I mean, I don't think, obviously, we have our 2 meetings a month and then all the other things in between, but I think that we need to remain flexible around
Yeah.
being able to meet as a group and as it is needed to make sure
Sure.
that we're supporting you, the staff, and the parents, through the beginning of the school year as we reopen.
Well, essentially, we have about a month left now because of the start of school. The other thing one thing that did not come up during this meeting that some people have suggested might be considering a staggered start to the hybrid model. And I don't know if that's something that you're discussing at all during negotiations and so on. But usually, I remember first day of school, after the first day of school, usually the principal will send out a message or you send out a message that says it was a good day, great start. It's different this year. And there's so much new in a school and in the way things are going to be, especially at different levels. And given the transportation issues and all of these things that are going on, that it might be worth considering staggering the actual physical opening. But just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think, we have to wait and see where the negotiations go. Aside from that, interestingly, since we decided to do the hybrid, and I know that was talked about in previous meetings, I've actually had emails, but also people follow up with me to say, well, if we're starting the hybrid, please start at the same time, because it defeats the purpose of trying to go back at the same time. I would want my kids to meet the teacher, and, if my kid doesn't go in at the same time someone else's, it can kind of go backwards.
See.
So everything is, discussable, and we have to wait and see where the negotiations go. But you're gonna make some people happy, and you're gonna make some people unhappy.
That's right.
With every decision that we make at this point.
We've already done that.
We have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, any other new items? Okay, anybody have anything they want to read into public comment?
We got a lot more emails.
Yeah, I have a quick summary of
Okay.
the ones we have, if you
Okay.
want to do
I
that.
think it'd be important to give those to
Yeah.
Jay if he wasn't on them, so he can include them.
Yeah, and I will add them to the list if they're any different from what we have. So Tracy, and I apologize for murdering people's names, Troncoso was concerned that the hybrid plan might be fluid, that it might change in terms of safety. She's comfortable with it as it is, but if it was going to get, the days were going to get longer, she had some concerns with that. Lisa Barrasso is disappointed that there is no full in-person plan currently in the works. Lisa Barnowski wanted to know if her children would now be eligible for busing based on tonight's decision. How could she enroll? Joe Comtois said he's not able to watch, but wanted to know how to get all the information presented at tonight's meeting. I know this is being taped. The agenda packet is also on the school committee website. So if you go to the school committee and agenda packets, and then you'll be sending out information about parent
The two parent
Forums.
names, yeah.
Laurel Harris wanted to, just make a statement that making busing available at the high school would make a big difference in her choice for what model to use. Melissa Sloan, we just answered this question, wanted to know if we're going to require masks for K and 1. Again, Tracy Troncoso wanted to know if a student had their own device they were using at home, would they have to bring it to school with them, if that's what they were using?
With their own laptop?
Like their own laptop, or would one be provided to the school? And then Will Crawford wanted to know, what would the person do, who would the person notify if their child was showing COVID symptoms? And then who gets informed, the class, the school bus, the community, et cetera?
Okay.
All right,
There was another really good question around, will we be using the information from last year for free and reduced lunch? Or will parents have to reapply this year?
Yeah, I forwarded,
Just,
Go ahead.
So your free and reduced lunch status stays with you until the following October.
oh, cool, okay, good.
And then, but then most families just, kind of, you can reapply, DESI puts it out, they've already put it out, it's in, mid-July. And then families kind of renew or reevaluate, if they need to consider that, so, and I'll reply to the one you sent
okay,
me.
thank
Oh,
you.
terrific,
I
thank you.
forwarded it.
And
Yes,
then
thank you.
the kindergartner.
I don't know that answer, so.
Yep, and we can even help that, family.
Thank you.
So, and they can go on the website tomorrow, give us a little time to put in the option, and then they'll just go in and register, and there's a little box to check that says free and reduced lunch. And, you know, we'll verify that with our list, you know, and over the next couple weeks, but, you know, people are pretty honest, and, they can it should be ready, sometime tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeff?
I had a question from Nancy Kiernan, just want to know how the high school quarantining will go, and I think Maria brought that up, and then you had mentioned it, so.
And with that presentation, we want to do that at our next school committee meeting? or-
Let me just speak with the individuals that are going to be involved, and we'll figure out the best format, and I'll communicate that to you.
Good.
Yeah, I don't think we can wait 2 weeks.
Well, that was my question, yeah,
2 weeks is too long.
Yeah.
because people do have a lot of questions
Go
about
for the
safety.
medical.
Yeah.
And I did want to go back to that, because I didn't get to say what I wanted to, but, I mean, if you have critical stuff that has to be voted on, and we have to have a meeting on a not Tuesday,
Oh, yeah.
I.
Absolutely.
Oh, you know, but I'd be
Okay.
comfortable saying, hey, we need to get
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
I know you guys
Yeah.
are flexible, we
Yeah,
would.
yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear.
Oh,
Doesn't have-
no, I know that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I don't have any necessary agenda items right now, and I don't know that I would even have that data from Friday or over the weekend. But if we had something and something, you know, necessitated getting together, I know you're all available, we just post it, 48 hours later, we're meeting. So we can be very flexible.
Don't plan any vacations.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Can't anyways, right? Can't go anywhere.
No.
Okay, any other public input?
I'm just gonna say what, I am gonna say this. I think people are, the sense I've been getting is people are concerned that, because there is so much up in the air and there is so much change, that, you know, the quality is not gonna be there. And I think, I'm going to say this, I think you are all working towards getting something that's in both the remote model and in the hybrid model that is of quality and substance, so that we don't have what these tutoring services are sending out all kinds of stuff to us saying, you know, the COVID slide and let's get over this. And how do we do it and, you know, start these programs and so on. And it's not minimal because for many students, there has actually been some regression and so on since last year. So parents are concerned, people are truly concerned. But I personally see that you are working very hard to get this to a point that there's education that's gonna happen this year for these students. And doing it in the safest way that we can. So I appreciate having that extra meeting with discussion, the quarantine and all of those things, because that's the extra thing in the whole process. So I appreciate that. But parents, I think people should feel assured that we're here, we're working hard to make sure that that's what, you know, happens for each student in our district.
And certainly not to belabor this, We had over like 150 people, I think, Linda, the count was over
It's
150.
156.
That, worked in the working groups, all summer long, that volunteered their time, parents, staff members, committee members, part of this. Everyone is working to make this coming school year the very best it can be. There's gonna be bumps along the road. There were last spring. I really do think we overcame them. We perfected it as we went along. People are nervous. It's just a very uneasy
Yes.
time still. But we will do the very best we can. We'll put a good product together, and we will improve it throughout the course of the year.
I'm
know,
also
with
nervous,
those
and I'm a parent
modifications,
too, sending
right?
my children back, so I'm
Right.
I know that.
So, thank you.
All right. That it? Okay, so we're going to adjourn to executive session?
Oh, no.
I know.
It's up to you.
Yeah, I like to just quickly, yeah. Go ahead.
We're going to executive?
Yeah.
I recommend that this school committee, I recommend that the school committee adjourn the general meeting and go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation and not to return to the general meeting.
Second.
Hey, Donna?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Rhea?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, we'll take a 2-minute break.